One.
Good evening and welcome to the April 6th Board of Supervisors meeting. I am the Vice Chair, Fred Weiss, and I will call this meeting to order. And at this point, let's rise and pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll call the roll. Supervisor Blundy,
Here.
Supervisor McCartney,
Yes, sir.
Supervisor Lewis,
Here.
Supervisor Grenier.
Here.
I am here. We have a quorum. Okay. Public comment on agenda items will be taken as each item is discussed. And we'll go to item 4, community announcements. Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you. Reminder, during this portion of the agenda, residents and youth organizations may call in to make a special announcement, or you can contact the township at admin@lnt.org to request a special announcement be added to a future agenda. The Environmental Advisory Committee is hosting an in-person lecture on beautiful backyards with native plants at the Community Center on Friday, April 29th, 2022, from 7 to 8 p.m. That's all we have, all I have.
Is there any supervisor that has an announcement to make? Any members of the community? Hearing none, we'll go to item number 5, consider approval of minutes for March 16th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in, any public comment on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. All those approving the minutes, raise your hands, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. 5-0, thank you. Item number 6, Big Oak pedestrian improvements consideration. Mr. Fiacco, the floor is yours.
Hey, let me put this just a little in context if we could. So we've asked Joe to be here tonight. I've provided to all of you information that you had seen before. He had made the presentation regarding a plan that he and his staff had come up with that was presented to the CTC. You have all of that information regarding their thoughts regarding the use of that money. As a reminder, we have the Regency Bridge Fund, which I know this board has been diligent about keeping separated and earmarked for projects from that settlement agreement in this project area. This is certainly a project that would qualify as such. Joe has his presentation and is ready I'll say to the vice chair, if you want him to pull that up to show, but it is the presentation that he had made before. If you think that would help give context to reintroduce that to the board, it's been a few months. You can do that. So while he'll take the floor, I think it would be from the board as far as what direction you'd like to give him if you want him to do a 5-minute overview of that again.
With the consent of the board, should we do a short overview?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
It's an aerial of Big Oak Road in Regency. Okay, great, thank you. So essentially what we were asked to do was to develop a plan to help people to get from either side of Big Oak Road. We have Regency to the north and Regency south here. More in detail. So what we looked at the volumes of and speeds of traffic on Big Oak Road. The big question was early on, can we get a traffic signal there to help us cross Big Oak Road? And the bottom line is there's not enough traffic to justify stopping Big Oak Road. So in the end, traffic engineering world, you need enough traffic on the side street to stop the main line. So we looked at what we have there. Big Oak Road is about 58 feet wide. So it's a long haul to cross it over. And so what we proposed was narrowing the area in where the pedestrian crossings are proposed so that the pedestrian can cross by Locust Drive in 2 phases. You cross to the median and then wait for a gap and cross the balance of Big Oak Road. We were, this is more of a blow up of it. We're proposing a median island here on this side of Locust Drive. The reason it's here is because we can still allow left turns to come in to Locust Drive and won't be affected pedestrian traffic. We are proposing bulb outs, which is extending the curb further out into Big Oak Road. So not only can you break your crossing of Big Oak Road into 2 steps, but those distances won't be as far to cross. We're proposing striping and delineation to add visibility to these crossing locations. We're also proposing to connect a sidewalk along the north side of Big Oak Road to make that continuous all along. So we were calling this Part A, the pedestrian crossing at Locust Drive, and that was somewhere in the range of $230,000 to $250,000 to get that work completed. And we would be proposing signing along with this physical construction to let the motorists know that they are coming to a pedestrian crossing location. We call that A. B is the intersection here of Fern Drive and Bundy Drive. We're proposing to eliminate the right turn lane at Bundy here. The volumes aren't that high, and we can reduce the distance that pedestrians need to cross by eliminating that right turn lane. We're proposing installing a bulb out at Bundy Lane to reduce that crossing distance. Installing a pork chop island at Fern Drive to reduce the open space here. This is all pretty much open blacktop today if you drive by there. We're proposing these pork chop islands, for lack of a better term, so the pedestrian who wants to get across Big Oak at this intersection can cross to this island and then the second cross over Big Oak Road. We're also proposing to extend the Fern Drive median. That's the median here, separating in 2 directions of Fern Drive, bringing that out because if anybody makes this move, they know sitting back here, it's a long distance to get out onto Big Oak Road. So by bringing that median out, it reduces the vehicular distance that they need to travel. So when they get a gap, they won't have to travel so fast to get onto Big Oak Road. And the cost of this work over here at this intersection is estimated to be about $135,000 to $150,000. And while we weren't specifically tasked to do this, while my engineers were looking at it, it kind of made sense to improve the pedestrian connection to Regency South to the businesses on the other side of old Oxford Valley Road. There's a CVS over there and a logical destination for people in the development. So we're proposing making pedestrian connection from the development into the walking path that's there. And there's if you look at the aerial view, it's a big, long, wide walking path. It's really for exercise and recreation. But if somebody was going to go to the businesses from the homes and vice versa, they would logically walk across the area, the grass area in here. So we're proposing this 110-foot connection trail to make that much more easier. And this is about a $55,000 to $60,000 improvement that we were recommending. So those were the general parts of crossing Big Oak Road. I'll share another screen. That once you're on the Big Oak Road, you logically want to make the connection over to Regency North. And there is an old road bed, that's old Oxford Valley Road, that's there. It's not open to any traffic right now. And we're not proposing it to be open to traffic, but with some improvements there, we can see a trail to make a connection for the people who are living in Regency North to get over to Big Oak Road, and also for the people Regency South to get, once they get the Big Oak Road up to Regency North. And those connections, the 8-foot wide path and some lighting, we're estimating would cost about 165 to 185,000. So those were the improvements that we were recommending to, again, improve the ability for pedestrians to get back and forth over Big Oak Road. With that, I'll open it up for any questions.
We make a motion before we.
Well, no, because I think there's a couple of more, there's several other things to discuss, just so we're aware. A couple of points I want to make. First, as you'll recall, the recommendation from Mr. Fiacco that the board is aware of, and the people here from the HOA were aware of, was that portion of the trail. While I don't want to get into the legal specifics, that's what we have Dave for, that the recommendation was, I said to ownership, to the group, probably an easement would be more appropriate, where the HOA would assume maintenance and responsibility for that trail. The only other thing I do want to point out that Joe will say is if the board was so inclined to move forward, the recommendation would include to put an RFP together for design services for someone to construct what this would look like, sort of similar like what we did with the roundabouts, where they put the concept together and then there was collaboration between all of the various engineers that we have. So if you move forward on the concept, that would be what Joe's recommendation would be in the end, that if you made a motion to move forward, you'd make a motion to draft an RFP for design services for the concept that you have in hand. There is one more thing, and I'll try to do this because they've made this presentation. I've outlined the one distinction between, I think the HOA is, and people are here, I'll let them speak for themselves, happy with the plan. And their hope was, or their one difference was that they wanted the pedestrian buttons to be included as part of this. The CTC followed the recommendation of Mr. Fiacco that not be done at this time. That's a separate application to PennDOT. You need pedestrian counts and a variety of things. I don't think, and I haven't spoken to Joe yesterday about this, I don't think Joe's not opposed to that. I believe he thinks that the better course of action would be to get everything installed, see where it's at, see if it rises to the level to need to put that application into PennDOT, and then to do that second if it was needed. And for a reminder for everyone on the record, those dollars, if they're not spent and it's determined that it's not needed, it's not like we'd spend it on something else. It's specifically for this area and would just be spent on something else in the future. So that is this pot of money for this whole area. So those are the differences between, I think, what the HOA will talk about and what Mr. Fiacco has outlined that you've had all before you. And that's it.
So the consideration would be to make a motion to approve a draft of an RFP for design services for pedestrian walkways and adjunctive
As presented by the traffic engineer.
As presented by the traffic engineer. Big Oak Road.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Bundy, seconded by Supervisor McCartney. Any discussion by the board?
So,
Mr. Lewis?
yeah, I was going to say, first, I'd like to thank Joe for his work on this. And the Citizens Traffic Commission worked with Mr. Fiacco and SAFE diligently in reviewing design plans and made a number of suggestions that were incorporated into the design process that you see here today. And the Citizens Traffic Commission, I don't want to take Art's words, he could certainly speak, approved of this particular design. So I'm generally supportive of it. If we do the RFP process for design, that would mean the design process would probably be a couple months then, and this would likely a fall project, right? So like October-ish, maybe?
I think that's fair. Yeah. I think
Yeah, and we have other stuff that's queuing up, so that seems reasonable.
we may actually see prices come down a little bit by the fall too.
Well, be hopeful.
Well, because at the end of the year, a lot of these companies will be looking for a final project at the end of
Yep,
the year.
the
And you might
last.
get a better price. Yeah.
Yeah. So in general, I'm very supportive of the project as written and
I'm certainly in favor of moving forward on this. In terms of the last piece, the Oxford Valley easement, do we have to debate that tonight? Or is that something that we talk about moving forward?
I'd make this, I mean, in the end, right, you're going to have someone design the project. I don't think you have to decide that tonight. However, prior to engaging a firm that would start measuring that stuff out and spending money to do that, you'd need to make sure that we were all square. But I think there's actually agreement. I think if you saw with the HOA regarding that recommendation.
I was going to say, the solicitor reviewed that. Is that sufficient for your, okay. Yeah, that would be my only, as long as you're okay with the acceptance, then yeah, I'm fine. Should ask that, I've forgotten, but yeah.
So that's fine. Should not be a big lift to get an easement there if we have to get, go that direction.
Yeah.
Mr. Grenier, did you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what everyone else is saying. I think this is a nice plan to improve pedestrian access to the area safely. So nice job, Joe. My concern, I don't know if concern is the right word, but the unique part of this is that area off at Old Oxford Valley Road. It is essentially a road, right? It's not a path at the moment. It's pretty beat up, but it's in a great location to provide additional access. It's just everything we're talking about with respect to roles and responsibilities to maintain it in the future, liabilities, all that good stuff. I'd also throw out there, and this is more for my folks on the Historic Commission, is that we have the octagonal schoolhouse immediately adjacent to that path that we've been looking for years to try and do something with that. So that may be when we do engage a design firm, they may be able to offer some unique perspective to integrate that into the path, so that we may have some historic feature on the edge of that too, that we could serve to make it that much better, in there. So I would encourage us to take that in consideration moving forward too. But generally, I think this is great to connect the two portions. And Joe, with your staff looking at the connections to the businesses in the area, that it makes perfect sense to try and get foot traffic to those areas, because that's where people are most likely going to want to walk to if they're not just going for a walk, right? So I'm looking forward to see what we can get out of this.
Great, thank you. Mr. McCartney?
Yeah, I mean, same things that everybody else was saying. I think Joe did a great job. Citizens Traffic, you guys did an amazing job. John, I know that you worked with those guys and pushed for this to be presented. So I'm glad that we got it to this point and that there's a consensus to move this project forward.
Thank you. Members of the public? It's your turn. Just give your name and if you're a Lower Makefield resident.
My name is Bob Nemiroff. I live at 89 Lavender Drive in Yardley. That's the carriage side of Regency at Yardley. And I'm here tonight appearing on behalf of the Regency at Yardley Homeowners Association Traffic Committee. With me tonight is Mark Paroli, who is a member of the board of the HOA. And we're appearing to address the April 1st, 2022 traffic modification proposal for Big Oak Road, which I will address tonight. And Mark will be addressing the Old Oxford Valley Road proposed improvements shortly. On behalf of the HOA and our committee, I do want to thank the board for considering our proposals that are embodied in the April 1st, 2022 written proposal that we submitted, which we hope the board will accept, which essentially supplements the proposal that you have received from Safe Highway Engineering with regard to the traffic modifications, which we support, subject to the qualifications that I will address with regard to the traffic modifications themselves, and which Mark will address with regard to the modifications to Old Oxford Valley Road. We are certainly gratified that the board is prepared to act to improve pedestrian safety when crossing the intersections of Big Oak at Budney/Fern and Big Oak and Locust. And as the board knows, there's a funding mechanism in place to make all of this happen as a result of paragraph 2B of the 2006 Matrix Settlement Agreement. Based on the proposal that I've read from SAFE, the cost for all of these improvements as proposed by SAFE is about $490,000, which is more than enough. I should say, with the additional proposal that we have made, there's more than enough money in the escrow fund, as I understand it, to cover not only the $490,000 cost of the SAFE proposal, but also the additional cost for the traffic signs/signals devices that we are proposing be installed concurrently with the traffic improvements. That cost is about $20,000 based on a quote that we have received from the manufacturer of these devices, Tapco, which would involve installing 2 poles at each intersection with a static crosswalk sign and a more dynamic flashing yellow signal facing both directions for traffic. It's a 55-watt system, and that is the system which is recommended by Tapco, which does in fact contain the push-button activation for pedestrians. And what I am told by Tapco is that these devices are actually pre-approved by PennDOT, which I think is an important consideration. Now, what I have brought with me tonight, so that I don't take up too much of your time, because all of the details are set forth, I have a binder for each of you, and it's indexed and tabbed, and the items that are addressed in this binder include, or the documents include, the Regency at Yardley HOA Traffic Committee proposal, which you have already received. The Regency at Yardley, March 29th, 2022, HOA board meeting minutes, which approved that proposal. The May 18th, 2006 Matrix Settlement Agreement with that paragraph 2B, which is the operative paragraph. The February 15th, 2017 addendum to the Matrix Settlement Agreement. The Safe Highway Engineering Executive Summary and supporting documents, which were all provided to you previously by Mr. Fiacco. The Tapco sales quote for the 55-watt crosswalk system, which, as you will see, provides you with all of the details that you would need to understand with regard to these devices that we are recommending be installed. The email exchange or the email string with Tapco regarding these devices between my colleague Mark Feller and the gentleman at Tapco. And I included this email because it really explains in detail what you're going to read about if you choose to with regard to the 55-watt devices that we're recommending be installed. And finally, the Tapco annual maintenance contract quote for these devices, which I understand do not require a lot in the way of maintenance, but we asked them to provide us with a maintenance quote on an annual basis. And for all of these devices that we're recommending, the quote is about $3,500 a year. So in total, you're looking at an additional roughly $23,000 to put these devices in at the same time as the improvements are being made to the travel lanes. Needless to say, our bottom line concern in this situation is pedestrian safety. I will submit to you that the installation of new crosswalks are going to invite more people to actually cross Big Oak Road than do now, many of whom are seniors, who are going to take a little bit longer to get across, even once the travel lanes are narrowed pursuant to the SAFE plan. And I further submit for your consideration that motorists are much more likely to slow down and stop in response to flashing yellow signals that are activated than they would be to a static sign. I just had a similar experience myself today. I was actually in the courthouse in Chester County this afternoon, the Justice Center. And when you come out of the courthouse, there's a designated crosswalk to get you across to the parking lot. And these very devices are installed at that location. And I stood there for a good 10 minutes today to watch the reaction of vehicular traffic with pedestrians going in and out of the building. And every single time the motorist stopped because of the dynamic nature of these signals that is essentially what we would like to see installed on Big Oak Road. So we're respectfully suggesting that the board be proactive rather than reactive. Why wait until an accident happens with a senior who is crossing the modified travel lanes and something catastrophic occurs that may have, the risk of which may have been mitigated that much more with the installation of these traffic signal devices, especially when you consider that the funds are available right now. So why wait? We're talking about enhancing pedestrian safety, which I think is something everybody's interested in. And when you do that, you mitigate the risk of accident, particularly a catastrophic accident, particularly with regard to seniors trying to cross that road. And as I said, very little maintenance will be required. And we have a contract quote for the maintenance that would be required on an annual basis. All of these reasons, we urge you to read through these materials. I'll ask your permission to approach and provide these to you so that you have them. I also urge that you adopt the SAFE proposal, subject to the qualifications that I've discussed this evening, stated differently, in conjunction with the HOA proposal. So with your permission, may I provide these to you?
Of course, Mr. Chairman.
Can we engage Joe while he's doing that?
Yeah, so,
Yeah, can I talk?
go ahead.
Yeah, yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah, while we're distributing.
Yeah, this system that he's talking about, which is I'm well aware of it down at the Chester County Courthouse and many other locations, is a system that is permitted to be installed by PennDOT, but much like the traffic signal, it has to be permitted by PennDOT. So, you know, I guess a traffic signal is pre-approved to be used out on the highway to regulate, you know, traffic from two different streets, but there needs to be enough traffic to justify that signal. So we don't, in fact, we actually took counts out there and there were no pedestrians crossing out there. So we certainly couldn't go to PennDOT and ask for a permit to put a flashing device when we, at this point, do not have any pedestrians crossing. I mean, so that's kind of where we're at. I would hope that these improvements encourage enough trips that we have a significant number of people crossing. And if that's the case, then I would suggest we request permission to install that flashing device. It's actually called a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, RRFB. And we've actually recommended one in Lower Southampton as well. It's an excellent device, you know, when you have pedestrians crossing at a location. But in this case, we don't have them yet. You know, our counts, we specifically counted the traffic through that corridor and there were no pedestrians crossing at that point. So there would be no justification for me asking PennDOT to approve it. And there would be no justification for PennDOT to approve it without the presence of any pedestrians.
And let me just, Joe, you were an inspector for PennDOT, so you know what that process is, correct?
Well, I was I was the
I'm
traffic
sorry, not an
operator.
inspector, but you were a reviewer. You would sit and do quality reviews for PennDOT.
I worked for PennDOT for 15 years. I'm well
That's
aware.
how we stumbled onto you. So, and I guess my point though is as well is in the end to put that application together, and I'm certain what the gentleman is saying is correct. More people will be attracted to it, providing the evidence by which we have to give PennDOT, who sometimes doesn't sign off on these things as fast as we want, regardless, to be able to have that more as a slam dunk that they would approve it. I understand his concerns notwithstanding that in the end, by the time people are crossing, if there's a need there, we want to move on that as quickly as possible. But your opinion at this point would be that they would not even consider it absent the evidence of the people crossing, correct?
That's correct. And there is adequate sight distance out there. We actually, not only do we count the vehicles, we have speeds. The posted speed limit on the road is 35. The 85th percentile is what we engineers use for design is about 45 miles per hour. So we understand and we're designing it. We should be designing it for the 45 mile per hour speeds, even though the legal speed limit is 35. And there is adequate sight distance to cross, that road, given the speeds that are out there.
And let me just ask this one other way. You're not aware, or are you, of times when PennDOT would give a preemptive approval? Like, in other words, it's not there yet, but we'll give you a preemptive approval. It would need to actually physically be there for them to be able to approve that permit.
It would be
right,
extremely unusual. You would, like if the Phillies were building the stadium and they wanted to put this between the parking lot and the ballpark or something like that, that would be an example of where PennDOT may consider approving it before the volumes are actually there. But in this particular case, I just can't see it. And again, I wouldn't recommend it, because if I'm putting signs with flashing devices where there are no pedestrians now, I'm taking away the effectiveness where we actually have pedestrians crossing at other places within the township or within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So as an engineer, I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending it, not knowing how many pedestrians we're going to have crossing there.
And Fred, another way to ask or I guess reference sort of kind of what Kurt was just saying, they don't do the whole Field of Dreams approach, right? If you build it, they will come. So you have to see where pedestrians are actually going to cross based on what you've been doing, and then you can improve. It's an iterative process where if they're going there, you get the numbers and then you can improve where they're going versus just doing everything at a given at a specific location ahead of time and hoping they use it, right? Is that fair?
Fair.
I just want to remind the board as well, since Mr. Majewski is texting me while Joe, our community development director, what Joe described as far as the crosswalk area is, as the system, the lighted system he's talking about, is the same system that's being installed as part of our trail project on Roll-Off that's going to cross Big Oak over to the community center. So that is something we're going to be installing this fall at that site.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
One final comment. If the board is not inclined to accept the proposal that our HOA is making this evening, I would hope at a minimum that the board would be committed going forward. Once these improvements are made, that there would be a commitment to reevaluate the situation with regard to the installation of these traffic devices, so that it does not fall through the cracks, that there would be a finite period of time within which this evaluation would be made once these crosswalks are installed.
I think that
I would recommend that as well. Yeah.
You just heard it. I think that would be.
I'm not backing away from the proposal that we're making, but I'm looking at a worst case scenario from our perspective.
And equally, sir, this is our safety engineer. I'm sure you've seen him talk through other projects. The good and the bad of Joe is that he designs and then he comes back and he improves and then he improves again. So you have the understanding of the board that We can't right now because that's the rules. I love the reptilian theory that's going on here. I appreciate your skills as an attorney. I was just on a panel about this very persuasive argument that you put forward, so I love to see it here in play. We are committed to doing what we can do for the township. We are committed to fixing the problem that Toll left you with. We're sorry that Toll did that. We're sorry that the court did it, and we're doing what we can to improve it.
If I could echo Supervisor Blendy's comments, the board actually and Joe at SAFE have a proven track record of following up on projects and making adjustments to make things even safer. So as you might have familiar with the roundabouts that the township delivered, Joe's gone back and done analysis. Our public works folks have done stuff. We have made adjustments along the way to continue to derive a safe outcome for motorists on that road. So I think, you know, you can feel very safe that the board and Mr. Fiacco and SAFE will look after it if it were to be installed in the fall. Actually, this is one area we've, like I said, the roundabouts are just a tremendous victory in terms of both unique design to solve a problem, and follow-up has been tremendous on that. So I would expect the same.
And I just would point out, since Mr. Lewis, what was specific, but I'll be even more specific on top of his point. The board, all 5-0, just passed a motion to make improvements on the roundabouts to the tune of, what was it, Joe, $15,000 or $20,000 that the board agreed to, following essentially a 6-month post-review of that project to spend. And as you pointed out, there is a dedicated pot of money for this in place. So it's not like the board would have to figure out where they would be scraping dollars together to take from something else to be able to do that. So I think all of those pieces are in place. Joe, what would you estimate would be a typical post-project inspection where you'd start measuring? I mean, if it's in the fall, we would anticipate people would be out there. Maybe not in the dead of winter, would there be lots of pedestrians crossing over there? But what would be a typical time frame to go out there and start assessing that after the project was complete?
I would suggest after people get used to it, they know it's there, and then we have some good weather that we can go out and take some good data that we would hope to be like a peak period, much like, you know, Christmas is to the shopping center, like a beautiful spring days once the Toll community knows that this crossing's there, and they know, you know, the various connectors where they want to go. So I would say not an entire year, but I wouldn't want to rush it either.
I defer to Mark.
May?
Thank you.
Usually we like to let Art go first as the CTC chair. So I don't know if you would be all right with waiting, Mark.
Okay.
Thank you. A reluctant chair.
Yes, they're not in chair. Arthur Cohn, 7906 Spruce Mill Drive. I'm the chair of the Citizens Traffic Commission. One of our recommendations there was to look at this in about 6 months, see how it's playing out, and possibly make some tweaks. And I don't know, we didn't take any position on this on the signal, but I'm not sure what it takes to put this in, but would it be possible to put conduit or something in there? I don't know. Would that be the right thing to do, or while you're digging things up? I'm not sure.
The system is solar powered, so you wouldn't need the conduit.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure about that. Okay. Yeah, our recommendations here were clearly mark the island across the crosswalks and the island, particularly the island. I'm from the city, and and I lived in the city, and I drove all over the city, and I don't know how many times I saw vehicles that had crashed into islands or were on top of islands, and also into bridge abutments and anything else in the road or near the road. That's why we put this in here, to make sure you put as much as you can markings to prevent cars from hitting this island. I know the the island or the divider up there on Lindenhurst Road, right off of Woodside, that's been hit many times. So that's just an example of how people, for whatever reason, they like to hit those islands. Also, street lighting to illuminate the crosswalks in the evening. I don't know if you looked at this or not, how much lighting is out there now. Mr. Fialco,
No,
you didn't look at that?
No.
Okay, yeah, I don't know, in case people want to cross in the evening, there might be something going on at the, at the center over there, they might want to cross the road and have some lighting in there. Make sure those paths are lit up. Also signs, that's already been discussed. Make sure there's signage there ahead of that, near that, and everywhere to make sure, yes, these are crosswalks to the drivers and to the pedestrians. And as Mr. Nemiroff said, the people living there, most of them, and myself included, we're not as fleet as foot as we used to be. So if there's any questions from the board,
I've walked with you, Art. You are fleet of foot.
I'm not fleet of foot.
Hello, Dale, Art.
And how long have you been on the Citizens Traffic Commission, Art?
I don't know now, quite a while, from the very beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Combs.
Okay, thank you.
Where's the RFP?
Thank you again.
Lighting.
I am not fleet of foot. Okay. My name is Mark Paroli. I'm at 221 Grant Way, Yardley. I'm the president of the HOA. I've had the opportunity in the past to talk to the board about this subject. And on behalf of the board and the residents, thank you, thank you, thank you. John knows that we've been looking at this for about 5 years. And I'll go back to something that was said 5 years ago. And that is when we first talked about this path on Old Oxford Valley Road leading to Big Oak, the point was why lead people to somewhere that Big Oak where it was not safe to cross. So to Bob's point, we are doing all of the things that we wanted to do. Our interest is just making it as safe as possible. The one thing I would ask Mr. Fialco is when you measured the traffic, was that in the last couple of years?
It would have been last year, in 2021.
Okay, the reason I asked that is unfortunately our clubhouse was closed from I guess August of last year until just recently. We had an unfortunate flood. It just reopened. And obviously prior to that, because of COVID, we were closed from March of 2021. So that reduced, if not inhibited, people coming over. So I just point that out. The other thing I would make a request as it pertains to the crosswalks is if we can't get the flashing light initially, would it be possible to have a police car stationed somewhere on Big Oak to at least create some presence in terms of that 35 versus 45, 50 mile an hour speed? That might help the situation initially.
Well, we'll be happy to do that initially, but you understand that that can't be a permanent fixture, but we'll try to do that as often as we can.
Okay, the sooner the better. Thank you. Okay, if it's October, that's great. Okay. I want to just talk a little bit about, and I'm a little confused about this path, the 8-foot path that runs from Big Oak to behind our tennis courts and then onto the path by our tennis courts, by our parking lot. I've heard different things that are going to happen with that. I think I heard earlier today that there's going to be an easement for that path and that it could very well become Regency's responsibility to maintain that road. Is that correct?
Not become, it would be
It would be,
Regency's responsibility.
okay. As we go through this and whoever it is that it's awarded to, we'd want to make sure that there are certain spots along that road path that are not secure, the base, just from observation from going there. I don't know if Joe has looked at it. We just want to make sure that whatever we accept is acceptable, is going to maintain that there isn't water flowing underneath it, that's going to erode the roadbed and, those types of things. The other request we have is that there be no vehicular traffic on that path.
Correct.
To the degree that there would be some kind of link, fence, or just something, bikes and walkers. That's because we've had instances where people have driven on there, dumped crap, and we've had to call public works. So I think it would be important, and for the safety of the people who are going to be using it for biking and walking.
Can I just answer two of your questions there?
Sure.
So in regards to the first thing, there may be an occasional utility vehicle that needs to get in there, would not be, would be someone doing repairs or what have you. But in regards to your first point, and I'm hoping Supervisor Grenier smiles when I say this, right? One of the things that we've instituted here that he's pushed for in our last project as well was it will be several consultants working together on this project. We will have the design engineer that will help put the plan together. We'll have Mr. Fiacco, who is, I don't know, you're the ideas guy. I don't know what to call you, Joe, but we'll have him on there with his engineer. And quite frankly, if it comes to dealing with issues of asphalt and the condition of the base and what have you, our township engineer, Mr. Pokel, would be involved as well. That was the way we did the roundabouts. We had 3 different firms that were all collaborating together to deliver the best project possible for all those perspectives. So I think all of those things, we would, our inspector that we have for the project would certainly make sure that was of the condition that it could be safely turned over, and the township wouldn't be interested in giving you less than 100% perfect project on that if it was compromised. So that will be the job of 2 of the 3 guys these 2 guys and whoever else the design engineer would be as part of that process.
Great. Okay. So just to make sure there is no danger in the future of either the people who actually own that land, or if that parcel next to the academy leading up to Old Oxford Valley Road, if that were sold and developed, that area couldn't be used for their parking lot or anything like that, if we in fact had the easement for that 8-foot path. Is that correct?
Thank you.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. From our, we don't want to get something and then have it taken away. The last thing I would ask for, and Andy, I know is familiar with this, we're going to need some help from the township, maybe because it has not transitioned. The villas have not fully transitioned to the board. That stretch of path from what's going to be developed on Old Oxford Valley Road, leading around the tennis court to the sidewalk. Could you put that up on the, Joe, do you have that? It's, you know which one I'm talking about with the 8-foot path? I just want to make a point.
Talking about the path from Big Oak to the tennis courts.
Yeah, around the tennis, and then there's an 8-foot
goes
wide
around.
that kind of curls around.
Isn't that the property owned by the person who no longer lives?
No, it's all along.
Joe's getting it. I can tell. There you go.
Okay.
The wedge is not part of it.
Joe, can you point to where the path starts making a left turn and heading? Yeah, there continues to be a drainage problem in that area. It was on the punch list. Toll had done some preliminary work there. We found some concrete underneath, which prevented them putting inside. But the point is that area is not stable. In my uneducated terminology, that's what I would have to say. And again, we welcome the path. It's terrific, but I want to make sure that it's going to be there 10 or 15 years later. And it needs to be improved, not only for the path, but for whatever else is there.
Well, I'm sure Andy will agree, and I'm sure Mr. Ferguson will agree that before we give the last pennies of escrow to Toll, things like this will be taken care of.
Appreciate that.
So that's not an issue.
Okay.
We have, that you should be worrying
I
about.
want it on the record.
I'm more than
thank you.
happy to help. I'm sure my fellow members of the board would agree with.
And
Thank
just
you
to
very
follow up on that, Mr. Paroli, if that becomes before the board, they would have to approve this in a public meeting and you would have notice of that from an agenda. So
Okay, thank you.
May I
You.
make one more comment? Very briefly, something I thought of while I was listening, that is, and I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. I understand that there's a 10-year time limit on the use of these funds, and that 10 years is due to expire relatively soon. And again, I haven't seen it in writing. I've just heard this. I don't know if it's factual.
Yeah, there's so much
But if
around this whole thing.
that in fact is true, then the follow-up evaluation with regard to the installation of traffic devices probably has to be done before that money.
Sir,
But let me just say that that's not the case because we are continuing to collect money into that fund as houses are sold. So if that legal language is in there, I would, first off, I don't think it is. I'd make the argument that clock wouldn't start ticking until we got the last, whatever it is, check for that. So I've looked at that. It's been a while since I've looked at that agreement, but I don't ever recall being on the clock that way.
is your concern that the money would revert to toll?
Yeah,
No.
No.
to the township, I mean, not the toll.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm sure you don't mean to. We've been as open and as committed as we can, right? This board has made sure that that money sits separately. And we've talked about the money over and over again. So,
And frankly, I can't imagine as part of a settlement agreement that the township or that you all or that anybody would have signed an agreement that the township could just sit on that for 10 years and then take it. I've not ever seen that. So,
There's no way Gary can
yeah.
Yeah.
And Mr. Cruzan was part of that agreement. And having dealt with him a bit when I first started here, I can't imagine he ever would have signed up on that.
Yeah. Just as a way of background, we have gone back a couple times. When I was going through the agreement to the original people that were parties to the agreement. And we actually went back to the original solicitor to the agreement for a ruling. Mr. Garden, in each case, we've gone back and it's been found to be that the originator, the person who negotiated the agreement, that they're correct in their assessment. So we've been always diligent on this for a long time.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Any other public comment?
please.
Hi, I'm Joe Marinaro. I live at Regency of Yardley on the south side. 3 years ago, I came in here and described how I play Frogger trying to cross the street and mentioned that I know personal injury attorneys. When I get hit, I'm going to sue the township.
The man from the bicycle, I remember this. yes.
Exactly.
I was saying to myself, is he going to bring this point up again? Are we going to?
No, I'm not. I'm here to say thank you. That's all I want to say. I'm not going to take up your time, but thank you for finally considering to make it safe. Maybe it wasn't ripe to make it safe 3 years ago when I was trying to get across the street, but it is now. Thank you.
It takes a village and it takes a process. I think that Joe is relatively new to the township, but this is something the board's been talking about and trying to solution since even before you tried to give us notice about your personal injury suit.
Thank
See you
you.
again, Joe.
Thank you.
See you, Dave.
There you go.
That's right.
Yep. I'm sorry, we have another, and then you can go right after him. He had jumped up, he had frogged, but you beat him to it.
What should I, do you want me not to speak?
We don't know who you are, sir.
Hey,
Sir, you can call me Lee. Lee Pedowitz, 247 Truman Way in Yardley. Just a couple of questions. Dan, of course, I'm in favor of any traffic control we have. Just a couple of things. What was the schoolhouse that Dan was talking about?
the original schoolhouse.
The Octagon.
Area, the Octagon Schoolhouse, going back even before you were born, Lee. So.
But wait, this has got to be what? Like,
There are stones, and it's private property, unfortunately. There's stones that are still part of the, and you might, if you really use your imagination, still are part of that octagon.
It's north and east of the Old Oxford Valley Road if you cross over.
Between the road, between Old Oxford Valley and New Oxford Valley and Big Oak Road, there's like a wedge of land.
Is that where Dunkin' Donuts wants to go in?
No,
No.
it's too
It's
small.
on
to
private
put it.
land.
It's
Nope.
Because one of my questions was going to be, I know there's nothing there yet, like a Dunkin' Donuts or Chick-fil-A or whatever, but I brought this up before for some other projects. Should we look into the future in terms of traffic control? I guess it's premature to do anything like that. Like, you know, if somebody puts a Dunkin' Donuts in there, if it gets approved,
It's never going to be buildable. It's just a matter of, it's privately owned, and we're hoping that one day the owners who live in Florida will come to their senses and either donate or make some kind of deal with the township so that we can preserve the Octagon Schoolhouse, what remains of it, make it some kind of a monument, maybe put up a marker. You know, I was the liaison for the Historical Commission. Dan is currently the liaison, and it would be nice if we could do something to memorialize probably one of the oldest schoolhouses in Pennsylvania.
thank you. And just one other thing. With all due respect to Mr. Fiacco, when did he do his study? Like, I think it was mentioned before, like monitoring the traffic across the street.
Last year.
I think there've been a number of studies on
Yeah.
that road.
Okay.
It's not the question of the traffic, the vehicular traffic, it's the question of pedestrian traffic to put up the pedestrian beacon. So have we come to do things, this board? We take Mr. Fiacco's recommendations and his expertise, and we understand that there's other things that can be done, but we start out with the basic, and then we can study things as they go and make the improvements as we need them.
Okay, so the report that he showed on the Zoom or whatever, that's the report you have in your hands.
Well, that's the presentation that he
The
made.
presentation
the
they
information that
made.
he had.
Because the only thing I better comment on is that the overview, the aerial overview has drastically changed from what's in that report.
And the RFP will take that into consideration, modernize everything, and make sure that we have.
Because the reason I bring it up is because it's all essentially developed for residential, and in terms of traffic across.
And that, when it's designed by the engineers and Mr. Fiacco, Mr. Pokel, Mr. Majewski will all get together and give us the latest up-to-date design that we can work with. So we don't have to worry about when these studies were made, because it's all,
Okay.
we're a concept and we're going to go to.
Because the reason, and I'll keep my mouth shut, at least for this item.
Do not distract.
I know when Caddis was building and they made their presentations, they had an aerial overview, which didn't show my house, didn't show a whole lot of the properties in Regency. And they ended up having to change it. So, sometimes I'm a stickler for some of that stuff.
You understand?
So, you'll be sorry.
Always welcome to hear from you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other public comment?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
My name is Steve Cargo, and this is really quick, but I'd just like to point out that the pedestrian
Lower Makefield
traffic is
resident.
likely to.
Excuse me, Mr. Cargo. Are you a Lower Makefield resident?
I live at 35 Fern. Okay. The pedestrian traffic, we can very much expect will be peak during the summer season when the swimming pool is open at the clubhouse. So the timing for when this survey is done should recognize that there are going to be ups and downs in that traffic. And when the swimming pool is open is when we can certainly expect the greatest traffic load. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there any online public comment? Oh, Don?
Good evening, Donna Doan, 2814 Langhorne Yardley Road, Langhorne. For anyone who wants to see the octagonal schoolhouse, there's a picture of it on Lower Makefield History Instagram page, so you can check it out.
Any public comment on the line?
No public comment online.
There's an open motion to
Approve the RFP.
There is an RFP to construct the RFP.
They have the RFP for the concept.
and it's been seconded then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Fred, can I point out one bit on the path that goes on Old Oxford Valley Road to make
Hold-
sure
hold on a
that in
second.
the,
Hold on a second, Dan.
Yep.
Hold on a second. I'm sorry. Sunday.
As the maker of the motion, should I amend it so that the RFP looks at the issue of whether or not we need lighting at the crossing, similar to the lighting we had to add at the circles?
I don't think you need to amend it. I think if the instruction is, let's evaluate lighting as well, that can be done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Dan?
yeah, I'm glad you said that, Supervisor Blundy. The other feature specific to the 1/8, the existing path on Old Oxford Valley, when we're looking at easements, there are existing electric distribution poles immediately on the side where that 8-foot path would be. So we'll have to consider proximity to those poles and potential. I'm not sure if there's an existing utility easement if there is an easement, or if it's just an assumed one because it's been there for so long. But we'll have to take a look at how those overlapping easements may play into each other. I was looking at the street view, and there's several poles through there.
That can be easily taken into consideration in the motion. Nothing has to.
Yeah, Dan, my engineer assumed that we would be able to attach lighting to those poles when he came up with his estimate for that.
Even better.
Yeah.
Hearing no more public comment, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. 5-0. Motion approved. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, we will now go to item 7, the engineer's report. Andy?
Yes, Supervisors, you have within your packet my report. I would like to jump right into the agenda items, and to do that, I will share my screen for to present the Maple Vale stormwater improvements. Can
I
everyone
don't know
see
if we're
that?
seeing what, oh, thank you.
Okay. Is everybody seeing the presentation, or are you seeing?
We're seeing a Google Earth picture of,
Okay.
not sure what. Oh,
That
now we're
that
seeing
was
Greg.
Oak Road. I was
Hi,
doing my
Greg.
research during Joe's presentation.
There we go.
Okay, is that the presentation then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the presentation for the Maple Vale Drainage Project. If you'll remember, last year, there was a large storm that came through the township as a result from the remnants of Hurricane Ida. As a result of that storm, there was some significant flooding in the Maple Vale neighborhood, which consists of Maple Vale Drive and Meadow Drive. This is a neighborhood located just east of Taylorsville Road, west of the Delaware Canal, and south of the interchange with I-295. The existing drainage system that is within that neighborhood consists of two 30-inch pipes, slopes of 1.4% and 0.04%. That's not a typo. That is a very flat pipe. That pipe was constructed when the development was constructed, and then one was the additional 30-inch pipe was constructed several years later. There are existing storm inlets that discharge to those pipes that are located in the front of the properties at 15 and 18 Maple Vale Drive. You can see that they are the blue line. The inlets are the red circles. The blue lines are the discharge pipes that discharge to the canal. That drainage network was overwhelmed in the 2021 storm. That storm was measured by the nearest weather station, which was located in Trenton. And that weather station observed 4.25 inches in 3 hours, which would exceed a 100-year storm as by definition of NOAA. And just for clarification, the 100-year storm event is a storm event that has a 1% chance of occurring in any 1 year. It is not it is not a storm event that happens every 100 years.
Andy?
Yes.
I just want to interrupt you for 1 second? I'm sorry. So my friend David is here, and I will say that when we went down there, because I know we're referencing the storm, and that's important, but as the kind people down there have pointed out, and that was evident, right? It's not just those big storms that have proven to be problematic. It has been generally any long, even soaking storm that most neighborhoods would absorb and work their way through the system that over the years that they've experienced, and not just when there's a intense wet weather event.
Yes, I was just about to say that. And so the existing drainage network, again, you can see on this slide, there's the inlets that are the 4 dots to the right of that photograph. The total drainage area, which was observed to inundate the Maple Vale neighborhood, extends, you can see it's within that blue area. It extends up to Prospect Farm Drive and also to Highland Drive. There is also an unnamed tributary to the Delaware River, which flows just west of Taylorsville Road. There is a culvert underneath a driveway at 233 Taylorsville Road, and also a culvert underneath Highland Drive that we believe overtopped or became clogged with sediment and debris during that storm event, and overtopped the stream banks, flowed across Taylorsville Road and down into the Maple Vale neighborhood. So just to get into some of the engineering there, the pipe capacity for those 2 pipes that were existing, they are both 30-inch pipes. They're reinforced concrete pipe materials, and at that slope, they have a combined capacity of 43 cubic feet per second of flow through the pipe. A peak storm, which engineers designed for, PennDOT requires you to design for a 10-year storm. So that flow rate with the drainage area shown in the previous slide, a 10-year storm would equate to 99 cubic feet per second. A 25-year storm, which is the township requirement for designing new storm sewer systems as part of the land development process, that would be 111 cubic feet per second. And then just for additional information, the 50 and 100-year storm, you're upwards of 120 cubic feet per second. So the pipe capacity was 1/3 of what could conceivably be determined that got there during Hurricane Ida. And that's evidenced by the amount of flooding that the neighborhood has received. So our recommendation is threefold. The first recommendation would be along Highland Drive, where the unnamed tributary, you can see the stream that comes under the culvert of Highland Drive and flows north. That has contributed to flooding within the Maple Vale neighborhood as the stream overtopped its banks There is a overflow pipe through the stream bank on the eastern side of just upstream of the Highland Drive culvert. That is when the stream rises to the level of that pipe, it discharges water through the berm of the stream bank and onto Taylorsville Road, which we believe then would discharge down to the Maplevale Drive neighborhood. So the Maplevale Drive neighborhood is over here on the right. This is Taylorsville Road running north to south, and this is Highland Drive coming down and intersecting with Taylorsville Road. So our recommendation would be to capture some of that runoff from Highland Drive, install 2 vane grates, and vane grate style inlets are specifically designed to be installed on slopes or roadways with a longitudinal slope of over 4%. So steep sloped roadways, and the grates themselves are curved. And so even if there's debris, leaves, branches or something that are sitting on top of the grate, it's still designed to capture that water and get that into the inlets. And so then these inlets would capture the water from Highland Drive and discharge it on the downstream side of the culvert. So any blockage to the culvert would not have an impact on capturing that runoff from Highland Drive and discharging it into the stream. As it currently stands, there are 2 inlets on Highland Drive that are relatively flat. It was basically the remnants from an old trench drain across Highland Drive. They're relatively flat, and if any leaves or debris get on them, it's very easy for water to flow down along the Highland Drive and bypass those inlets and not get into the inlets. Furthermore, if it did, any water getting into those inlets would discharge under the culvert or into the culvert. And if the blockage in the culvert is downstream of that, where those pipes discharge, you would basically be contributing to the water that is overflowing Taylorsville Road and down into the neighborhood. So our recommendation would be to add the 2 inlets in the discharge pipe and discharge that downstream of the culvert. Some additional upgrades would be to remove all of the sediment and debris that is within the stream to provide additional capacity for that stream to carry large flow events, and then also to plug up that overflow pipe so that the water does not discharge onto Taylorsville Road and down into the neighborhood when the stream rises to that level. And we anticipate these total costs to be approximately $50,000. As you can see, this first picture on the left is Highland Drive looking at Taylorsville Road. There's the 2 existing inlets there. They have a relatively small grate opening sizes, and again, they're flat. They don't have the curved vane grates on them, and so any water that gets there, and if there's debris sitting on there, would simply bypass that and get down to Taylorsville Road. Also looking, this photograph on the right, PennDOT actually, as part of the Scudder Falls Bridge project, has done the township a minor favor in that they installed curb along the east side of Taylorsville Road, which was not there previously. Installed curb on Taylorsville Road, installed inlets on Taylorsville Road, and if you can follow the line within the roadway there, you can see that they installed pipe from those inlets in a trench, and that discharges downstream of the culvert at Highland Drive. So that would be an extra added measure to capture runoff from Highland Drive or anything that overtops the banks to get into those inlets and be discharged downstream of the Highland Drive culvert. Recommendation number 2 would be to take would be to capture any runoff coming down this is the southern leg of Maplevale Drive and Taylorsville Road, just south of Prospect Drive. And so we would be adding inlets on either side of the roadway of Maplevale Drive, and then discharging them in a pipe parallel to Taylorsville Road south, and discharging them to an area that is owned by the township, on land that is owned by the township. We would do that outside of the roadway within the grass area because Taylorsville Road is a PennDOT roadway. We would need a PennDOT highway occupancy permit. The permit required to install utilities when they're in the right-of-way grass strip next to the roadway is much less intense. So for scheduling purposes, it would be faster. And also this would minimize the amount of disruption to any traffic on Taylorsville Road. Also, it would be cheaper because you're restoring grass area as opposed to a roadway area. And so our recommendation would be to add inlets at Maplevale Drive at Taylorsville Road, capture any runoff that's entering that neighborhood and discharging that onto township-owned property. And then recommendation number 3 would be to increase the gutter capacity within Maplevale Drive and Meadow Drive. As part of our liquid fuels program, we are, or the 2022 road program, which you'll hear about in a minute, we are repaving Maplevale Drive and Meadow Drive. We took core samples prior to designing the road program and found that the wearing course asphalt in those two streets varies between 5 inches and 6 inches, which is very thick. It is something that is, we have the opportunity to then lower the roadway by 1.5 inches by milling out 3 inches and then putting down 1.5 inches. And I don't believe that that would substantially degrade the structural stability of the roadway because the asphalt was so thick. I think that that was just something that was overlaid over a period of time, those roads. And so by getting an additional 1.5 inches of gutter line or of storage capacity within the gutter line for stormwater flow, for instance, an existing 3-inch curb gutter would overflow or overtop the gutter and get up onto the lawns in approximately a 1-year storm. By increasing that gutter depth to 4.5 inches, that would overflow at approximately a 50-year storm event. So that would overtop the curb and get onto the lawns in a 50-year storm event, which would exceed what the township's requirements are for.
Andy, can you stop for 1 second? So I just want to make sure that that's point is highlighted, right? So it's not just a question in the end, and it's a very creative solution, or it's not. I'm not going to say anything as a fix, but it's a very creative remedy. Thank you. Where in the end, it's not just getting water down to the inlet. It is also going to help prevent, on a traditional storm, that backwash of water in over the curb into people's yards. So the fact that we have this road in the 2022 road program gives us this opportunity that's essentially already part of the program that we're going to do, that will be a complementary feature to help people down there. So kudos to Andy with developing that as part of the road program to help. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry, I wanted to let everyone know how good you are, because you're so modest. So
thank you. In cranking through calculation and cranking through the numbers, we estimated that adds a capacity of approximately 3.4 cubic feet per second. That's equal to 25 gallons of water per second of additional capacity that can run along that gutter line in typical storm events or larger storm events. So that's a measurable way to provide additional capacity along the gutter line. So as a result of all of this, as a result of the recommendations, what that essentially does is reduces the drainage area that gets to those inlets and pipes, the existing inlets and pipes in that neighborhood. That reduces the drainage area down to 17.3 acres. It was 47 acres. By taking a lot of that water offline and capturing it and discharging it elsewhere, that takes that water offline, reduces that drainage area to 17.3 acres. From a peak flow comparison, if the existing peak flows for the 47 acre drainage area were, as I stated previously, in the 10-year storm, it was 99 cubic feet per second. And in a 100-year storm, it's 129 cubic feet per second. The proposed runoff following recommendations 1 and 2 for a 10-year storm, that would make it 36.3 cubic feet per second for a 10-year storm. And then in a 100-year storm, 47 cubic feet per second. The existing pipe capacity then is 43 cubic feet per second. So we would have enough capacity within those existing pipes to manage the 10-year storm, the 25-year storm, and almost meet the 100-year storm. So in summary, Hurricane Ida was a large storm event, greater than a 100-year storm event. That exceeded typical design standards. We don't normally design for the 100-year storm because if we did, infrastructure would cost billions of dollars, even more than what it already does. And a large portion of the infrastructure would be not utilized in many storms. And then, so it exceeded design standards and it overwhelmed the existing drainage system. Diverting overflow runoff from the upland areas will greatly reduce the volume and the rate of runoff reaching the neighborhood. Preventing the unnamed tributary from flooding will reduce the change of overflow crossing or the chance of overflow crossing Taylorsville Road. Increasing the gutter depth will keep more water in the road and less water on the lawns and going down people's driveways. And recommended improvements will reduce the runoff in Mapleville neighborhood by 2/3, allowing the existing drainage pipes to meet township and PennDOT standards while also handling large storm events better. So that's my presentation. At this time, I'll open it to questions, comments.
Any members of the board have any questions, Andy?
Fred, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. So thank you. And I know, Andy, we talked about this on the side, and I'm glad to see Mr. Huckelbridge here too. I don't live in Mapleville, but I go through Mapleville all the time. It's my access to the canal towpath. And I've, we mentioned Hurricane Ida and Kurt's point earlier. We probably have a storm like that has a similar impact to what Ida did, if not every year, every other year. I remember when the first times my parents came to visit, my wife and I, after we moved into our house, all of Taylorsville flooded going up Highland even, and we were out there in knee-high rubber boots and removing trees from the middle of the road while my father was drinking his coffee and laughing at me. But all of Taylorsville was flooded, and it's happened more than once. And so this is something that the residents of Mapleville have been dealing with for a long, long time. And I'm really glad that we have an opportunity here to maybe not make it perfect, but move in very much in the right direction to mitigate a lot of the issues that they've been dealing with when it comes to flooding. Andy, I think you touched on most items. I'm glad you threw in the engineering numbers because that made me happy to see where we're at with the numbers. So thank you. Couple quick questions, and I broke them down to like Highland versus Mapleville versus other stuff. So at Highland, I remember when that open grate was there, probably 10, 11 years ago, whatever it was, and you could hear people driving in the neighborhood, and that's when you knew people are coming in the neighborhood because it would make that noise as they drove over it. But it is incredibly flat. There's a pipe that connects between the two and then discharges to the downstream part of the stream. And then I guess somewhat of a concern that I'd like to hear how you're going to address it. So we have an existing discharge to the stream that comes out of those two inlets at Highland. They do get covered with leaves all the time. We have the newer existing discharge that comes from the PennDOT inlets on Taylorsville. And now we're going to have another one that'll hopefully take on more of the runoff from Highland that the other two don't, but it will direct all that water or a good chunk of water to that stream. So we just want to make sure that we don't create another issue downstream where we have flooding downstream or incised banks or just really big pulses of water there. So can you talk a little bit about how we're going to protect against that in the future?
Well, first of all, we'd need to look at the flows that we're contributing. But in my opinion, we're not really adding much flow to what is getting there or what should be getting there in typical storms or larger storms. I mean, this is a stream that carries runoff from the higher ground around it. And so I think that in all of that instance, even, downstream of Highland Drive, that carries runoff from the stream and the watershed that contributes to it. All we're doing with this is making sure that it gets to that point as opposed to bypassing that and getting into the neighborhood.
Okay. And from a time frame perspective, we can split, we can do essentially, I forget how you refer to them, but solution 1 versus solution 2, they don't have to be on the same schedule, right?
That's
so
correct.
we can do Maple Vale sooner,
Yes.
but Highland will take more time because you're discharging the stream, so you're gonna need permits. So you don't want that to hold up the Maple Vale side of things, right?
Exactly. And
Okay.
Also, we've got the road program that's happening. We're going to be repaving Maple Vale Drive. If circumstances come where you can't get the storm pipe in, we're only talking about a 4-foot trench but it's our goal to get these inlets and that storm pipe in prior to the final paving of Maple Vale Drive. Now, in the road program, we do have language in the contract that says that they have to do Maple Vale Drive as the last road. So technically that would get paved later in the summer. So we do have some time to get this project completed prior to paving the road.
And then I think you already talked about it, but part of the issue is the stream that runs along Taylorsville for that stretch is often fallen limbs, and you've got sandbars and whatnot. So it's creating a dam effect essentially. So the idea is to keep that cleaned out. I know Mr. Hucklebridge thinks about that all the time because that ultimately, if it floods, he's got to go deal with it. So I know that's on the radar. But I was down there this weekend looking at it. You could see the big sandbars in the middle of it. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then I think you already touched on all the volume and rate changes. So that was really helpful to see how close we're going to get to even the 100-year storm for Maple Vale. So that was really good to see. And then when we were talking about the 1.5-inch increase in basically the storage area, right? You're digging your swimming pool 1.5 inches deeper that across that many acres. That's a lot of water that you can keep back. When you look at that practically speaking, people are looking at, what's going to hit my lawn, are they going to flood my basement or something like that, right? Flood the house. So now the way that looks, what is it? Up to the 50-year storm, none of that's going to get up to the houses anymore. Is that what we're looking at?
Right. Theoretically, that's that's the goal, and that's what the numbers have panned out, that if that's assuming that the curb height is 4.5 inches as opposed to 3 inches. We took an average curb height. There's some cases where you've got larger curb height. There's some instances where you might have a little bit less, but yeah, that's an average.
Good. And it doesn't sound like we have a ton of right-of-way or real estate issues for any of this, based on what you're describing. So that's a plus.
No, I don't see us as having to acquire easements or any other types of property in order to complete these projects.
Okay. And it sounds like it, but because Mr. Hucklebridge has looked positive this evening, but ultimately when this is done, we hand it off to the Public Works Department, and that they're the ones with the responsibility of maintaining all of this infrastructure. So I just want to make sure that, obviously that they're on board and this doesn't give them heartache or anything else or create too many additional headaches for them moving forward. Is that?
I mean, Greg can certainly speak for himself. I know that, throughout the process, I've been in contact with Public Works and talked this through with them. So, yeah, I didn't receive any negative feedback from that perspective. But like I said, Greg can speak.
Yeah, there's no concerns on my end on that.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. And the last piece, which, I think I've mentioned to you in the past about, potential future or additional mitigation of the runoff here, the oh shucks, I wish we could do this too kind of thing is, these are direct discharges to streams from a pipe because these are old developments and we're doing what we can with what we have. So we're not getting to treat the water, we're doing quantity, rates, and volumes. We don't get to address the quality issue like we do with newer developments, right? So one of the potential items I'd like to consider maybe as part of our PRP, that pollution reduction plan moving forward, is that stream that we're talking about overflowing all the time actually collects for those familiar with the big basin on Dolington, sort of kind of near Lower Hilltop in Dolington, a little further down Dolington, I guess. That's a big basin. It discharges to that same stream at the top of the hill, runs down the stream. It goes goes down the hill through some backyards and whatnot, and the one big property there. And then it goes next to, but doesn't connect. You probably get a discharge to it from the, what's the name? The Prospect Farm development, right? So there's a basin there that, runs next to that stream. I would love to see us at some point to somewhat improve that quality issue that we can't quite touch on with this project, but see how we might be able to integrate that into our PRP program to further maybe collect a little more of the volume and slow down the rates a little bit even more before it gets down to the hill across Taylorsville, and add in a little treatment to that as well. I think that would be, again, that might be a later project that's tied into our PRP that we get credit for, but we get sort of the, we get benefit from it for the PRP and the stormwater that runs into Mapleville here.
Yeah, as part of studying the drainage area, I did look at that basin from Prospect Farm, and there is, they have on the design plans, they have the stream, the 100-year water surface elevation of the stream, the floodplain shown on the plans, and it does come right up to that basin. There is some additional volume capacity within that basin between the water surface elevation in a 100-year storm and the top of the berm for that basin. So there is potential for investigating that further and possibly making some changes that could contribute to that.
Good. And I'll just close by saying I'm glad we looked at this, how we looked at it, when we looked at it, and we're able to integrate it into the road program this year, so that we're not doing it, paving the roads and then coming back and ripping them all up again just to install a few of these things, so that nobody ever likes that. So Nice job getting together, guys, and coming up with a good plan to mitigate an issue that our neighbors in Mapleville have been dealing with for a very long time. So I'm glad they're going to be able to get some relief out of this.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is a neighborhood that is low-lying and relatively flat area, east of Taylorsville Road, but hopefully with these recommended improvements that will make some positive changes.
If I can add one more thing to what Andy has been saying. Typically that water from the stream wouldn't be overtopping. In Ida, actually, there was a pretty large log in there that captured a lot more debris and kicked the water out of the stream. So while it's obviously beneficial to look at that basin, most of the time that water should never go into Mapleville. And with these additional improvements, it's less likely to even happen. But, to your point, it's not a bad idea to look at. So.
Yeah, if I could, in general, I'm very excited by the plan, went through it. I've talked to many of the folks on Mapleville over the years. I've walked that road as you know, Mapleville's in pretty bad shape. The drive area, the road's in bad shape. So I'm excited it's on the plan this year. One thing I was thinking about was the houses 232, 234, 236 Taylorsville Road. They're the ones that are on the north end of Mapleville and Taylorsville. Often see a lot of yard ponding, and there's no curbing there. And that road's been recently redone anyway. It cuts off part of the way on, I think, was it 234. So will those folks benefit significantly from this such that they won't have the same amount of yard water ponding that they've had in the past that you can always see when you're driving by? You can't guarantee.
They should, because one, we as part of the recommendation, we would be plugging up that pipe, that overflow pipe that discharges water out onto Taylorsville Road, and also the improvements on Highland Drive. I think any water that bypasses those two inlets on Highland Drive would just come down across Taylorsville Road and could contribute to those yard, the ponding in those yards. So I believe that this is a solution. Recommendation number one would have a positive effect on them.
And then one last question on this. There's a section of Taylorsville Road between where we last paved and where the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge Commission did. Is that like little strip area going to get fixed, or is that we have to do that another time?
So you're saying that between what there's a section on Taylorsville Road.
Yeah. So I'm sorry you're not here in person, although we love seeing you full size on Zoom. But it's like a little chipped area here. You can see here. And I don't know if this is outside the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge area or they were planning to clean it up later. But it's just a small area. I'm thinking, well, geez, if we're doing all this,
that's certainly something
fix that.
Contact the DRJTPC to.
It might be worth that, or at least talking to the PennDOT, see what they can do.
Exactly. Yes.
That's all I had. Thanks so much for your help on this, guys.
Any other questions to Andy from the board?
Well, no, but I'll speak anyway. Related and unrelated, right? Residents, when you have a storm basin, a sewer, whatever you want to call it, the things around your streets, they're not a way to get rid of leaves and twigs. You shouldn't be brushing stuff in there, and you should be making sure you try to keep them clear, especially around when we know heavy rains are coming. We're supposed to have some heavy rain, I think, for the next 2 days. So, just make sure it could be inadvertent by lawn companies or whatnot, but I'm amazed at how much of our, I'm going to keep saying sewers because I know you like to hear my accent, but how many are covered in debris, and when we get heavy rains, it really becomes a problem. So it takes a village.
Suzanne, to your point, think about the leaf pickup time of year. And I know on Highland, which is lots of inlets on a hill, there are constantly leaves on top of, inside of, just completely mounded over inlets, and that's going to contribute to all this flooding too, because the water can't get into the inlets anymore. So it's always a nice reminder. So thanks for doing that.
And if I may, I'm sorry.
James, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to Andy and for Greg on working on this. I know that the folks down in that part of the town are really appreciated, and thanks for Dan for chipping in some advice on it as well. We really appreciate it.
And Kurt.
So
I just want to add that, I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Kurt.
No, I just wanted to add to what both Supervisor Blundy and Grenier had said. If you see this, where we've had contractors dumping cut grass into the inlets, or taking twigs and leaves and packing them into those inlets, to call the township so our inspector can get out, because that is very illegal and causes not just runoff issues, but it can cause environmental issues. It can cause and can lead to the very flooding that we've talked about. And we've seen contractors, I would argue, unbeknownst to the property owner that retained them, making quick work of their disposal to do that in the inlets in the neighborhood. So please call the township if you witness that while it's happening and not days later, so we can try to catch them doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. And at this point, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendations of our township engineer.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Yeah, second. Is there any questions or comments from the board on the motion? Not hearing any, I'll open it up to public.
I just wanted to make sure everyone was waving. They were trying to get your attention that you weren't going to take a vote. You're a little rusty at this. I just wanted to make sure you.
It's like ride the bike, buddy boy.
So
Hearing no other questions from the board, I will open up the public comment. To come up and state your name if you're a Lower Makefield resident and make your comment.
Sorry, Fred.
No problem.
Hi, I'm Dave Virschel, and I live at 220 on Meadow Drive, and wanted to thank you, first of all, Wild Mike. Thank you, first of all, Kurt, you and your staff for coming down. I think the whole neighborhood appreciates how quickly you guys came down and took a look at this, and we really appreciate it. We have a couple of questions, I think, about the proposed solution, and I think I was getting text messages as we were listening. Just a reminder that this really is a pretty frequent event. The 100-year storm concept was thrown out there, but we had another 100-year storm in 2011. Same thing, and it really does happen frequently. And I appreciate your comment about the debris. We have a crew of people who goes out and mans the drains every time it rains, because everything that was in the gutters up above ends up in our neighborhood. So yeah, we can attest to that for sure. But a couple of questions about the solutions. Is it possible to get the PowerPoint redisplayed for solution number one?
Andy's pulling it up.
Thanks, Andy.
Can you see that?
Yeah, can you back up a slide?
That
Yeah,
slide?
perfect. Yeah, perfect, thanks. So on this slide, the red line there indicates the kind of the new drain that's proposed.
Correct.
Is it possible to do anything to, I don't know, expand or clear out that stream bed? Because I don't live on that side, but from what we've heard from folks who do, I think that stream bed does overtop more than we realize, and I think it's because of debris in it. Because as I think was pointed out, the water that ends up coming down there is coming from a huge area. So by the time it gets to the bottom of that hill, it's really already full.
Yeah.
And if it is full and we're just putting more water into it from Highland, it could backflow, or is it really going to solve the problem, if you know what I mean, if the stream's really already full? So is there any way we can increase the capacity of that stream or clear it out?
We can clear it out. That's part of the recommendation, is to remove the debris and gravel bar from that stream.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be great, because I think Mr. Lewis's comment about further down, there's no curbs and there is a lot of water that puddles there, and it even is backed up as far as to go into the other end of Mapleville. I know the the folks who live along, well, the neighbors just off the main road, their backyards constantly fill with water. So they get flooded from the back of the house, and it all comes from this side.
Yeah.
The other question, could you put recommendation 2 up?
Sure.
This was interesting. Where's that water going?
That would be discharged overland into it's basically township-owned property, and it would discharge overland and eventually end up in the canal. It's a very wooded area, so theoretically, it could probably just get infiltrated into the ground and be taken up by those trees.
Have you guys done a calculation of what the holding capacity is of that area before it would start to flow out?
Of
that kind of, there's kind of, I know what you mean, it's sort of a natural basin back there.
Yeah.
I just wonder how much water that can hold. The reason I ask is that if you see the word Meadow Drive right to the far right edge of the photo, really right by the DR, that is the sewage.
Yeah, that's the sanitary sewer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if that area gets full of water, it's going to flow into the sewage, and I think we'll have a very unpleasant situation. I just was curious, how much water can that area hold? And I'm not sure, envisioning the property, how the water will get from there down to the canal. I just wonder if we're just going to stop flooding one area and flood another area.
No, I mean, that area the water would dissipate or spread out over a large area.
Okay.
And so, like I said, it might not even reach the canal because it might just infiltrate into the ground or be taken up by the root systems of those trees. It's wooded in that area.
Okay. And our good friend and neighbor who lives back there and is trying to get a zoning easement, he'll be okay with all this, I guess? Doesn't matter?
I believe that he would be upgrade of this area anyhow.
Okay. Yeah, I think those are just the questions we have, at least that I had. So again, thank you. And hopefully we can continue to chat with you guys as this goes forward. What is the time frame for this? Sometime this summer?
Well, if you want me to answer that, I mean, first, if the board would approve moving forward, it would go out to bid. And I think as Andy, if you'd heard Andy say this, Mapleville is going to be paved. So the idea would be to try to get the project complete prior to the paving taking place. So I think the idea would be that this would occur sometime mid-summer, mid to late summer, with the paving of the road being late summer. And what Andy also had put together because we were anticipating the possibility that the board would approve this. We have instructed in the bid documents that Mapleville would be paved last, with the idea that if the board wanted to do this, we could try to line all that stuff up. So this would be coming soon if approved by the board.
Okay. We're kind of used to being last. We're last with Pico too, whenever.
Yeah, but not really last on a good way this time. So.
Yeah, sorry.
And I would say that, Supervisor Grenier mentioned it, but it might not necessarily be bid in one project because we would rely on DEP for an approval to remove the gravel bar within the stream and make any adjustments to that overflow pipe in that stream that could require a permit from DEP. I don't want to hold up the installation of the inlets in the drainage pipe at Taylorsville Road and Mapleville Drive waiting on DEP. So it's conceivable that it would be two separate projects, and this project would be the inlets and the pipe along Taylorsville Road would happen this summer, and then the gravel bar removal and the inlets on Highland Drive sometime thereafter, shortly thereafter.
And one other thing I forgot to mention on your recommendation number 1, with Highland, it wouldn't be possible to put two. I've seen on some of the streets that have really steep hills in Highland, you don't get a sense of it in the picture. It's really very steep.
Like a
And the
double.
water is really, yeah. Can you get two sets of drains to catch it? I've seen that on some of the other streets.
Yeah, I mean, that is usually done when we take a look at the detailed design for that to make sure that it's warranted. But yeah.
Yeah, because I know that water just shoots down that hill.
Right.
Poor people that live across the street enjoy it. All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Just come on up. Sorry, Dave.
Just give your name and that you're a Lower Makefield resident, please.
Yes, hi, my name is April Bulways Clower. I live at 20 Mapleville Drive. Hi, Kurt, thanks. First of all, thank you all so much for looking into this for us. As you heard before, it's not a 100-year storm. It's happened 3 times in my lifetime since my family's been in that house, and 1 time before I was born. Our house sits just next to the new pipe. So I was little when it was dug up and when the easement happened. I'm wondering, specific to that space, there is a huge influx of water during these storms, and there's a lot of erosion in the back of our property. So much so now the pipe is exposed. And I have a little guy who likes to explore back by the canal, and I'm wondering if there'll be any mediation to the land that was wiped away from the last storm or over the course of the storms that happened. And this may not be the forum, but I just want to put it out there as something to consider, just because of my yard and the neighbor's yards and those of us who had the water rush through, because it rushed over the pipes because the pipes couldn't hold the water.
Andy?
That's not something that we had anticipated as part of this project, but it's certainly something that we can look at and add to if the board deems it necessary.
Yeah, maybe just mix of rocks or dirt or something, throw back there and just kind of patch it back up. That would be great. The other question I did have was regarding the drain itself. I think we talked to you, Kurt, when we came out. There was questions from one of our neighbors, that neighbors on the other side of the pipe from us, if there isn't some option that we could have in the event of a flash storm like this, like a cage or something we could put out when a storm happens. We know it might be a hazard because of the road, but if we kind of coned it off, because when we talk about people being religious about cleaning a drain, whenever it rains pretty bad, we have like a little hint of PTSD now. So anytime there's a really bad storm, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, you see lights going on in houses, just people going out with flashlights to clean the drain. So we're really concerned about that as well. The plan sounds great that it will capture a lot of water, but in the event that it doesn't, and we do have debris, because after these tropical storms that it's happened, it's been on trash night that it happened before, and we got a lot of trash and debris we just couldn't control. And to see people up to their chest in the street kind of diving into the sewer to get things out and having emergency responses not even answering us, just anything that we can do as a neighborhood that we're able to attend to, we would just want to throw it out there that we would like to do that as well.
I'd suggest, and once we get going, we have a discussion with the Public Works Director about what some of those options could be, how we could facilitate that, and even have things ready and to provide options for the neighborhood or what we could do as well.
Yeah, and even just like, I think we mentioned since then, we've actually had trucks come by when it rains really hard, and that meant a lot to us too, just to see that we're on the radar now, this is a problem. So I just want to thank you for your time and considering this truck, and our neighborhood really appreciates it. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Just come on.
Yeah, I'm grateful too. And I'm Lorena Stoddard. I'm at 220 Meadow Drive also. And I just, thank you. But I came in late and I apologize. So I'm not quite certain that you addressed that the flooding from Prospect, that whole farm that's now built up, floods through, not down streets, but through, not down Prospect, but through the neighbors' yards, across and up and over Taylorsville, through the houses there, and floods a whole river before Meadow. And I didn't know if Andy actually addressed that, but they flood amazingly before it even gets to Meadow to be a river there. So I was just wondering if that was addressed too, because it doesn't seem to me that the 4 new drains that you've suggested are going to be as helpful as, I mean, we're excited, don't get me wrong. And I don't want to be ungrateful. I am very grateful, as I've cleaned out our garage several times and replaced our whole bottom floor. And I'm not the only one. So I just wanted to make sure you saw that part too. And I am a little concerned that the water that you're suggesting go down to the right side of the Maple Vale, right there, that entrance. behind those houses, that doesn't flood right to the back of their yard. Instead of having it come in the front of our yards down by Meadow and the bottom of Maple Vale, that it won't actually blow out the doors in the backyards of those 3 houses there. So thank you so much. And Andy, thank you so much. And thank you, Kurt, too. I appreciate it all.
Can we say one more thing? Just like you heard in the discussion, because you were all here for Regency traffic stuff that you heard. Once this is done, I hope you'd like to hear this. The township won't go away. I mean, we will monitor how this works, especially in wet weather events. And I say this with respect, David. I know you'll contact the township now because we've established this. So to me, in the end, once this is done, if there's other improvements that can be undertaken in a way that even cuts the, makes it marginally better that we can reasonably do, I'm sure the township would continue to look to do that after making an investment like this to get started. Okay.
And I'm just curious, are we like at the 10% design? We haven't even gone to like 60% or something at this point. This is just the draft, right? So you'll be having meetings on designs or no more meetings and you guys will just take care of it?
I think what Andy would probably do would be to put the design together. And I would imagine, because this is a public meeting, that he may come back with the design, but the idea would be to go to design and get out to bid fairly efficiently to get going with this for the reasons stated. So he knows how to get hold of me. So I would say if this is on the agenda again to do that, I can email David and say, we're going to talk more and make sure you guys come in.
Thank you. I'm from my experience of design build, I've done 10%, like 60%, 90%. And then we hopefully pray that the design is implemented by contractors the way you put it on a blueprint. Thank you, Andy.
Sure. And one thing I do want to say in response to some of that water that comes across Taylorsville Road, not necessarily at the roadways, is there is the culvert at the driveway to 233 Taylorsville Road. I've spent a number of times talking with the property owner there at that driveway and getting firsthand feedback from them as far as how often water overtops that culvert. And so I think that, debris coming down and clogging that driveway culvert could contribute to water coming across Taylorsville Road too. And so there's some sandbar removal in that area that needs to happen as well in order to help the situation.
Is there any other public comment? Is there any public comment online?
No public comment online.
In that case, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed, 5-0. Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Weiss, may I add one thing for the record, just so you're aware? This project itself, while obviously being contemplated, is not specifically in the budget. However, that is not an issue as you have funding sources as the American Rescue Plan would allow for, that would not require reopening of the budget or anything of that sort. This is, even though they've expanded it, this was one of their early allowances for projects. And even though I don't think Andy brought this up or told it, I mean, we're talking of a project that came out to about $250,000. We're getting another pot of money in, our second allocation in July for $1.7 million. So regardless of what other intentions the board may have with the money, there certainly is enough funding to fund this project in its entirety from that fund.
Thank you very much, Kurt. On to 7B.
7B is to consider the award of the 2022 road program, the base bid to James D. Morrissey in the amount of $3,212,292.40. We opened bids on March 31st. We received a total of 4 bids. We've reviewed the low bidder, the apparent low bid, which was James D. Morrissey. We've completed work with them before. They've done the road program in 2020 and 2019. We're familiar with their work. All of the items that they have submitted with their bid comply with our requirements and bidding requirements. And so I will say this, compared to the numbers that we received last year. The milling number, the price per square yard of milling is a little lower than what the low bid was last year. The wearing course is a little higher. I would say it is 10% higher per ton than what we received last year. That's indicative of the times that we were in with the price of gasoline and everything higher. So I don't think this is an unreasonable number. I think the bid price is fair. And so I would recommend awarding the base bid to James D. Morrissey in the amount of $3,212,292.40.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion from the board? Oh, wait, hold on. It's a motion made by Supervisor Blondie, seconded by Supervisor Lewis. Any comments from the board? Questions?
Fred, very quick question for Andy. How were even Greg, I guess, in terms of quality last year and the job that they did? Can you comment on that?
Well, James D. Morris.
Or last time Morrissey did anything for us, I'm sorry.
Right. So we actually observed, went out and observed the roads that were paved in 2020 as part of our maintenance bond inspection, and didn't find any repairs that were needed for 2020. So, and even the roads that they've paved in 2018, we haven't had any major issues with that. So,
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, I'll open up the public comment. Any public comment online? Hearing
No
none, I'll call the
public comment
question.
online.
Thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you.
thank you. The next item is to consider the consideration to approve bid alternates to James D. Morrissey, Inc. for the 2022 road program. If you'll remember, we separated out 6 alternative bids by roadway. The first alternate bid was for the Memorial Park parking area. That amount is $65,841.50. I don't know if you want me to go through all the alternates or one at a time, however you want me to handle that.
So just for the board's sake, the recommendation of staff, if you want Andy to go through all those, he can, would be to just put this in context. The total amount budgeted is $3,078,000 for 2022. The recommendation was for this first bid alternate for the parking lot. It is part of a subsequent grant application. It would also follow up with the previous project to get that done. If the board were so inclined to do that, it would take the project cost over to about $200,000. But as we pointed out in the report, we believe, as there is typical in every road program, there'll be some savings that we will incur from quantities and from not using leveling course on certain things that would cut that amount in half. So it was the recommendation of the staff to do the first bid alternate. If the board wants Andy to go through each of them, we would be getting a larger and larger gap between what we budgeted and what those totals would be.
Mr. Chair, I'd recommend that we accept the staff's recommendation to include bid alternate 1 as part of the 2022 road program.
Second.
Any questions on the motion? Comments? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Andy.
So the next item on the agenda would be to consider payment number 6 for the Memorial Park Improvements Project Phase 2 to Miko Constructors, Inc. in the amount of $6,174. This is for the benches that were installed on the pickleball courts. We are still withholding in excess of $11,000 for the punch list items that they are addressing. Again, we're waiting on weather. We need 2 warm 50-degree days and rising and also dry days consecutively in order to complete the punch list items. So we're withholding money until that punch list work is completed, but we believe it is fair to pay them for the benches that have already been installed. So we're recommending payment in the amount of $6,174.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any comment on the motion? Dan?
Yeah, just real quick, I just wanted to make sure that, and I believe it doesn't, I just want to make sure. Back, I don't know, end of February, I sent out an email about all the debris piles in the wetlands and the floodways that are at Memorial Park, sort of between the garden and where a lot of the tennis court work has been done. And I went by again today on my way back from the airport, and it looks just as bad, if not worse now. Today, I just want to make sure that's not at all part of this, because if it is, we need to hold them accountable for it. But I believe it's something separate, so I just want to make sure that's the case.
It's my understanding that it's not part of Miko's work.
Okay.
Any other comments from the board? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's
Thank
all.
you, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go to item 8, project updates. Any questions about the ongoing projects? Yes, sir.
Sorry, Fred. Yeah, I guess this is a good time to ask what I just mentioned. I went by today, like I said, on my way back from the airport to see how the status was of the large debris piles and other, the silt fence ground into. I actually walked it in more detail today, and it's even worse than I thought it was. I wanted to see what the status is of removing all that material from there, and I also want to make sure the company that was involved with, I don't know if they actually put the material there, but the company that donated the new path material, porous pave, I think they were called. They have a big sort of a PR thing on their website about how great it was, and I just want to make sure that if they put it there, then I think we should inform them that what they did. But more importantly, I think we need to work to have personal recommendation would be to have our engineer come up with a restoration plan immediately to remove all that material from the wetlands and the floodways to get it back into compliance with federal, state, and local regulations ASAP before we have a non-compliance issue with any of the relevant agencies. It's been, and it's been there a couple of years, unfortunately, and I think we've been truly aware of it since end of February now. So I just want to see some positive movement on that before it gets too late.
So Dan,
Any
we can
recommendation?
look and see if maybe what you're looking at is different than what staff is looking at. I know that what we looked at that we've done a cleanup for was material that was left over by the kids who were working on the 9/11 site this past year that had material down there. If there's something, and I know we have done a cleanup, if there's something different, I'm not aware of something that would have been down there for years, but if we're missing something or looking at something different than you are, we then obviously need to address that. But I know staff was out, it was coordinated through Park and Rec. I think the Park and Rec laborers, I don't know if Greg had any guys down there or not, but Greg, did you have a chance? Greg, I see Greg there. Did you have a chance to look at that? Are we missing something? Are we thinking of something different than what Supervisor Grenier's talking about?
You're at the right location.
They cleaned out what was put there by, I believe, volunteers. I haven't been back recently. It was right when they were working. I made sure they had the silt fence in place, and then they were pulling out that material and smoothing it out. But I can go look tomorrow and see what else is going on there.
Yeah, the vast majority of the material is still there. Basically what they did is it looks like they moved a little bit of a mulch pile around and drove over it and then put some seed down the silt fence that you probably had them install, Greg, I would assume, over by the sort of where the path crosses over the stream. that was installed. I think it got ripped a little bit because now it's not there's open, you know how it works when something gets ripped off of one of the posts. So you have some of that going on. But there are two long linear piles of debris, a lot of the redstone, the red tipple that was there, coupled with dirt, coupled with other things, with silt fence ground into the old silt fence, not the new stuff that was there before, is in those piles. It's actually, there's silt fence that's like buried in the wetlands itself, really close to the stream. It just, we're flirting with disaster here if we ever get an inspection from someone. So we
I
got
believe
to
that
figure out.
material's been there for several years. I didn't realize exactly what was in there. We were focused on that other stuff from the volunteers that was most recent. We thought that's what the concern was. But I'll follow up and see what else can be done to get that out.
Yeah. It looks like it's a couple, backhoe it out of there and dispose of it properly and just do a slight regrade, not a major regrade because it's pretty flat to begin with, and then just reseed it without a whole lot of hassle. It's just, there's certain stuff in there that's just shouldn't be there. That's all.
Item 9, manager report.
Thank you. You have the first item on there in your packets was the presentation that was the PowerPoint, that was done with Enterprise from the last meeting. I guess it's 3 weeks. It feels like that was a long time ago. That is on the agenda for your consideration.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion from Supervisor Bundy, seconded by Supervisor McCartney. Any comments from the board on the motion?
Sure.
Supervisor Griner.
Sure. My understanding is that the motion would be to move forward, essentially move forward with what Enterprise presented us at the last meeting. Am I correct in my recollection here?
Yes,
I believe that's right.
Okay, I just want to make sure. So from my perspective, really interesting presentation. I think it has a lot of potential positive merits to it. But because of the, potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over multiple years, I would not vote in favor of the current motion to go directly to Enterprise off of what I'll call one marketing presentation from a sales group. I think it could potentially be a great option, but I'm more inclined to move towards pursuing this path via an RFP to Enterprise and other providers of both leases and sales, so that we can do a side-by-side comparison of other providers to make sure that we're getting the best deal. I think I feel, we throw around the term fiduciary responsibility a lot. In this case, I think it's a meaningful term to make sure that this particular approach is the best one for the township. And I think Enterprise potentially, whenever competition comes in, they may, even if they are the best at what they do, when competition comes in, they may even sharpen their pencil and make it an even better deal. So I would support going forward with this process through an RFP first to vet it. And then see what the best offers that we get. And given a few other items that are on the agenda tonight, I'd like to get some input in the near future from others that may have to implement this program in the long term. But that's again, I don't think this is a terrible idea by any means. I don't want it to sound like that, and I'm not against it. I just feel that I feel strongly that we should RFP this to make sure that we are getting the best deal through Enterprise or anyone else. That's my main point.
Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, I'll go open up public comment. Any public comment online? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no?
No.
No, opposed?
Motion approved, 3-2.
Second item for your consideration is awarding the chemical bid. Our recreation director, as you'll recall, several years ago, had the foresight to get us involved in the Bucks-Montgomery County Aquatic Consortium, where we've saved considerable money and all the things that we need for the pool. The bid response summary was placed in your packet. We'd ask for consideration for approval.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the 2022 pool chemical bid as presented by the Bucks Montgomery County Aquatic Consortium.
Wait a second.
Second?
Motion made by Supervisor Lewis, second by Supervisor Blondie. Any comments from the board? Yes, sir.
Very quick question, and this is, I just want, when we look at the line items in the bid, there are some massive quantities of various chemicals. How do we manage, and do we need to store any of these chemicals at all on site, or is this something that is stored off site by others and we have access to as needed?
Remember, the bid is for numerous municipalities and collections. So I believe most of the stuff that we would get, there might be some storage, but that would be, it's kind of like rock salt in a different way, right? You're ordering it as you need it. And there might be something sitting there, but that's all under controls. And the people that handle this have to have special certification to even handle it. So there would not be much in the way of something that could be considered a hazard that would be sitting around for spilling, contamination, what have you. So it would be something.
That was my understanding. I just want to clarify that because there's some large numbers here. So anyhow, I'm in favor of this. I just want to clarify that as part of the process.
Any other public comment? Any other comments from? Let me unzip the mouth and zip it again. Any public comment? Any online comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you.
Next item on your agenda, while I gave the board an update, since this is a public meeting, we'll make sure that we understand why this is back on. The board did previously approve financing. The board did approve an ordinance for the road loan that we have to do, that the solicitor will be talking with you momentarily, and the financing for that. As you'll recall, TD Bank was the low bidder. We had awarded that. A couple of things have emerged. Some of the timing issues, if everyone is aware of how volatile interest rates have been. And this isn't just passing an ordinance, it's getting it over to DCED for approval, what have you. All of the background work is done. However, the bank could no longer hold the rate. So we've coordinated as staff to get all of the paperwork redone, but we do have to requote it. I've spoken to all of the banks that previously participated. I believe we'll be getting at least 5 quotes in, as we did the last time. However, the interest rates will be higher. There will be a cost to do that. I will remind the board that we did budget a very healthy 3.5 to budget. And even with interest rates going, the spec that would go out, that was a recommendation of our bond counsel, was to specifically outline an 8-week hold on that rate. And with the way that we're advertising and the way we're doing this, we should be well under that threshold to lock in that rate. My guess is we'll see an interest rate of maybe a 1% interest higher than what we had at the 1.5, which is still below the threshold. I'm asking for a motion to advertise again for financing for the road program in the amount of $1,650,000.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Lewis, seconded by Supervisor Blondie. Any comment from the board? Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Those no. 5-0. Thank you.
Item D for your consideration is, and I want to fill in a little context, and obviously, Suzanne, you're the liaison to EAC. The Kids Kingdom project is something that was put together with some assistance with Remington Vernon to do 8 or 10 trees that they were talking about. In conversation with Supervisor Blundy, who's spoken with the chair of the AC, they may want to take a look at filling in a couple of extra trees. And I think the idea was to try to get an approval in hand, so we could still hit the spring planting season with Linda's assistance to get that done. So I'll turn that over to you, Supervisor Blundy, to fill in anything in addition to what I just said.
Yeah, I think you said exactly what I asked you to say, and I think I got something wrong. So thank you. And then my apologies. The plan that had been developed, and there's lots of thoughts out there about different plantings that we can do. But the plan specifically for Kids Kingdom is 6 shade trees and 2 undershrubs. Linda thinks there might be, well, I asked Linda to look at it, and she thinks there might be more that we can do, better that we can do, but she needs to walk the site. We need to have maybe Greg come with us and make sure that we're getting the right plants to bring shade that we want. And so I would ask that the way we approve a motion, assuming you guys will approve it with me, would be consideration of the Kids Kingdom tree planting in amount not to exceed $7,500. That way we will at least be able to do the 6 and the 2, but maybe able to do some additional.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the Kids Kingdom tree planting project subject to a limit of $7,500 in total spend.
Second.
Got a motion made by Supervisor Lewis, seconded by Supervisor McCartney on the planning at Kids Kingdom. Any discussion or comments from the board? Hearing none. Public comment? Online comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you very much.
Next item, again, for a little context. We have 2 defined benefit pension plans. We have a police pension plan at the end of the year that had $16 million or so in it. I'm rounding. We had a non-uniform pension plan that had just a shade under $11 million. I asked our pension asset managers, because this has been a sort of something that's been going on everywhere, is for an assessment of both of those plans, if there were any Russian holdings in either of those funds. So they did get back to me, and as you all know that I've reported to you, it is a marginal amount of money. As of a week ago, we know this can move by a few dollars a day. There was $4,446.85 in our police pension plan, $3,129.72 in our non-uniform plan, in the form of a bond fund and in the form of an international market index fund. So as we were preparing that, if the board was so inclined to divest ourselves from those funds, wouldn't be at a cost, we could move that money around. It is a marginal amount, but that's there for you to debate, discuss, and consider.
Chair, I move that we divest all Russian holdings from the police and non-uniform pension plans.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to divest our holdings from Russian companies and the institutions. Any comment from the board? Discussion?
Fred,
Any
if I
public
could
comment?
Oh, Fred.
Go ahead.
Sorry, very quick. Now this I've been thinking about this since we started talking about it. The other thing, Kurt, thank you for looking into this, that we wanted to consider if we did have any investments, was including Belarus, because that's how most entities that have done something similar have included both, by the nature of how things are going. In this case, we don't have anything with Belarus. And Fred, I'm sorry, Fred, Kurt, I know you checked into that, so I appreciate it. I'm wondering if there's language we could add to make sure that we don't mistakenly or somehow reinvest in Russian or Belarusian investments somehow until such time that this, there's peace and the war's over there, et cetera. I'm wondering if I can't see Dave, but if he's sitting there, if he might have an idea as to how we might be able to do that.
The only thought I had would be, and I think other places are doing this, I haven't seen exactly the wording, but it would be to have the investment managers monitor all investment to ensure that no reinvestment in the Russian or Belarusian I guess investment holdings be made until further notice.
Until the United States listed sanctions, right? We don't want to be in a.
Longer. I mean, because it maybe even longer than that to tell you, because we don't know, there's different levels of sanctions. I'm just saying, until further notice, that may be up to you to decide that. So I'll decide however you want to do it, but.
So I guess with the maker of the Supervisor Lewis as the maker of the motion, would you entertain how do you say, a friendly amendment to tweak the language as recommended by our solicitor?
I'd definitely open for that. One quick note, for those who are regular individual investors who use ETFs, a number of the funds are redefining what's included in the fund to remove Russian companies from the fund. So if you have an ETF, some of those are being redefined depending on your fund manager, because I was curious about this, and then Russian markets were closed. But yeah, so I'm definitely supportive of that.
John, before you accept the motion, I just want to, the amendment, I just want to clarify where we are with it, because I'm really not looking forward to just keeping it on the radar, right? Hopefully, please, this issue gets resolved faster. But I think it makes more sense to say that when our country listed sanctions, we would reinvest than rather than us trying to monitor and remember. So
yeah, it would be FinCEN, the part of the Treasury Department, which would enforce sanctions. Yeah, I mean, I'd be certainly open to having that as the benchmark for this, because I don't envision that these sanctions will be removed for a very long time, and it's very much reminiscent like apartheid. It's going to take a long time for the sanctions to work, probably in this case. So, but yeah, no, I would be, if is the way to say this that everyone would be comfortable, would be that we move to divest Russian and Belarus holdings from the police and non-uniform pension plans until such time as the U.S. Department of the Treasury removes sanctions upon the Russian Federation.
I think if the seconder of the motion agrees with that, move forward on that.
Supervisor McCartney, you agree to the amendment?
I think it was Dan.
Oh, Suzanne?
Or
No,
Suzanne.
it was me.
I thought it was Dan.
Yeah, no, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so any further comments from the board? Public comment? Online comment? None heard. I'll call the question. All those in favor of the amended motion, please signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you. Okay. Item F.
So I would like to make a motion. I would not like to make it, but I will nonetheless make it, to consider accepting the resignation of the township manager with his last day of full-time employment being July 4th, 2022, and his official resignation effective July 18th, 2022, with the condition that he stay on as a consultant until we are able to find a full-time replacement. That is my motion.
I will second that.
Motion made by Supervisor Blondie, seconded by Supervisor McCartney on accepting the resignation of our township manager with his last day of work being July 4th, 2022, and his official resignation effective July 18th, 2022, thereby becoming a consultant until we find a replacement. I would like to amend that if possible.
Sure.
Before you do that, maybe it's because I was having a sidebar with Mr. Ferguson. The consultant agreement would have to be negotiated with terms acceptable to Mr. Ferguson.
Yeah, and maybe.
Is that acceptable, Mr. Ferguson?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you accept the proposed amendment?
Absolutely. James agrees.
James agrees?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So with that, I will ask for comments from the board. Discussion. I will open.
Fred, can I
it
ask
by
a
saying-
clarifying question? I don't know if you.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I understand the difference between last day of work versus official resignation. Official resignation dates.
You're on
For me,
vacation.
when so
terminal leave.
He's gonna work his tail off for us between now and then he's gonna take 2 weeks of vacation.
so basically he's using his vacation time at the end of. Okay, I just
Well, some of
the
his
wording's a
vacation
little
time,
awkward.
because I don't know that he's had a vacation really since he's been here, but yes.
I think July 18th is the last day of his contract.
That's what I just want to make sure that
Yeah,
he's covered in some way, shape, or form. Just the wording of it, the way my HR department would do it is a little different. That's all. So I want to make sure. And then would it technically be July 4th or July 1st, given that it's a federal holiday?
Yeah,
I don't know that it matters, to be honest. Yeah.
He would be paid till July 18th anyway. So
yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know if it matters how we word that
really
first part.
It's really not that important, other than the fact that if something comes up on July 4th, it's a work day for him.
Under his contract, his current contract expires July 18th. Under the contract, 3 months' notice is what is required, which he's giving us tonight, more than 3 months' notice. So that's all the terms have been complied with as far as I could tell.
Okay. I would my preference, I guess, to make it cleaner, my preference would be to have two separate motions, one for the acceptance of the resignation with the dates as mentioned here, and then because there are two different activities in my mind, and then a second motion to develop a consulting agreement of some type that's mutually agreed upon, as they seem like mutually exclusive activities.
I don't agree, and I have no interest in making or accepting that kind of an amendment.
Motion stands.
Can we check with our solicitor to make sure that's an appropriate motion to combine those two?
I mean, it is. I mean, it's may not be quite as clean as what you prefer, but it is actually. I think it's almost identical to what we did with Mr. Fedorchak back.
Yes.
2018.
Yeah, that's.
So I think that was. I think that was actually almost. And I haven't looked at it. I'm not gonna say. As I recall, I think it's almost the exact wording we have with that.
So is the intent then to? And Kurt, I'm not going to make you divulge anything. I just, from a date perspective, do you envision starting new employment as of what's the July 18th? Sometime shortly after July 18th?
No, I will start employment on July 5th.
So you're gonna have two jobs then for about 2 weeks, right?
Not two jobs. I will have worked my last official day here, and I'm taking those 2 weeks. I'm taking essentially the vacation that's been prorated to me for this year to take me to the next payroll period.
Okay, so I think I would prefer to. I don't like that overlap. That is not clean. I would end the contract on July 4th, and then have it clean, and then serve it, because we all found out about a month ago, right? So we're 30 days into that time period of our notice, formal notice.
I don't
rather
think that's
than
a correct statement, Dave. Dan.
I was informed.
Not in terms of finding out, but when notice begins, right? Because
Well,
today
it's
it's
a
formal notice.
It's a verbal contract at that point. He's formally notified us that he had accepted a new position approximately 1 month ago. I think we were probably on slightly different days, so I'm approximating here. And then
That would
You
be
could carry that
120
out 90 days, and then we'll be, I'm uncomfortable
Rejected the,
with
So
a,
I understand. The motion has not been changed, so the motion is
I,
still on the
I'm
floor.
just commenting on the motion, that's all. I understand your,
I was just for efficiency standpoint, the motion has been asked to be modified. It has not, it's been refused. The motion is still on the table. So, I understand.
May I
your
finish
objection
commenting on
I
it?
understand your objection to the motion, no problem. Is there any other comment from the board?
I'm not finished commenting, Dr. Weiss.
Oh, okay.
So I'll be brief. So I'm uncomfortable with, I mean, go till July 5th, all the benefits, absolutely. I'm uncomfortable having someone who's working as a full-time manager for another township having to pull double duty, essentially. I don't think it's fair to that person, and I don't think it's fair to either municipality involved. That's an incredible amount of time commitment, stress commitment. I would hope that we'd be able to move forward quickly with finding a replacement. I know we don't have much time, but we saw that the first year when there was a similar setup with Newtown and Lower Makefield, the level of commitment that it took for both, and I'm just not comfortable with that overlap for anyone's benefit, including including the township manager and the level of stress that would put on him to have to address both rather large municipalities with heavy burdens to carry. That's nothing against him by any means. It's more about making sure that we move forward in an expeditious manner to find a new manager that can move forward efficiently, effectively, and be able to do the job without be focused on Lower Makefield. And that's the end of my comment. Thank you.
Any other comments? Any public comment?
Lee Pedowitz, 247 Truman Way, Yardley. I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Ferguson, and I do not know where he's going to another job, whether he's retiring. But if I had my own business and one of my employees told me they're resigning, I say, God bless you. And then it would be up to me to find a replacement. And I would not look to hire that person as a consultant unless I knew that that person was retiring and would dedicate his or her skills and whatever towards me. Now, I wish when I changed jobs, somebody made me that offer, but they never did. I changed jobs, I resigned, and then I was off into the wild blue yonder. I think we've got, April, May, June, 3 months to find a replacement. And I have to agree with Commissioner Grenier for a change, that I think it's a responsibility of us to find a replacement. And out of respect to Mr. Ferguson, let him go on to whatever he's doing. And I strongly believe that this is the way the board should act. And yes,
we understand your comments. However, in municipal governance, the Board of Supervisors, although technically in charge of the township, does not have the expertise nor the wherewithal. We are basically volunteers. We do not have a person that can do all the things a township manager can do. We need to have somebody that we need basically from day one. If we can get continuity for the township to do all the things that a township manager does, this is not a private business. This is a government. The government runs by a professional staff. We do not have people that can do this job out in the wings. We can just call up and say, hey, Joe, come on over, be a consultant until we find somebody that is going to be our permanent replacement. It's just not possible.
And may I also, Chair?
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing should be, right, construed, right? It's not, I don't think it's any of our intent, although I haven't spoken to everybody, that, as had happened in the past, that this arrangement would go forward in infinitum. It's just that the reality is, if we found a selection committee tomorrow and we started, we would never, ever be able to have somebody in place by July. It's just the reality. I hope it happens, in which case our consulting arrangement with Mr. Ferguson will be much shorter and less, but until it does, that's because we, John, Fred, myself, and Dan have been through it once already. And we know how long it took the prior boards to find a replacement for the old super manager. So with all due respect, and I mean it sincerely with a lot of respect, it's not the same. It's just not the same.
How should I address you, Suzanne? No, look, I hear what you're saying. What happened, I was at the board meeting when I think Mr. Ferguson's contract was up, because it gets renewed every couple of years or something.
2 years.
So let's say, I remember the vote, I think was 4-1 for him. But let's say his contract was 3-2, but whatever. But his contract was renewed, and I'm glad it was because he does a great job. But let's say at that meeting, he had been voted out. Then what? And what? How would you expect him to act?
Well, that is an interesting hypothetical, but since it didn't happen, we don't have to worry about it.
Well, okay, this is my last comment. When we hired Mr. Ferguson, how long did it take to get him?
Well, I believe the question, at least, but the question really is, when did the prior manager resign? And how long did it take?
He resigned in January and became a consultant until we.
I think that might be technically correct, but I think he gave notice, soft notice, maybe, Dan, to your point, but the prior manager, John, do you have a?
Yeah, so the prior manager gave notice of his intent to retire. I believe he was consulting a year before, and I have to go look at this, before the township employed JPM to do a search for a new supervisor, and he was helpful in all transition processes. But yeah, so I recall JPM, we looked at 3 or 4 firms, Solicitor Truelove, if you can remember.
Yep.
JPM, Lafayette College had a program, chief was there. I think they were selected probably January, February of that year. And
yeah, I think you're right, Supervisor Lewis. That was about the same time. Mr. Fedorchak gave notice that he was going to resign, I guess it was slightly over a year before he actually resigned. And then he stayed on as a consultant even further as we were looking for a new manager. So he was on for quite a long time after his intent to leave, and even after he gave his notice to resign. So, and I think the process was like 7 months or more to look for a new manager.
Well, I think we had the new manager, well, July 18th is the official date. So
yeah,
we were able to find somebody between roughly February and July timeframe, right?
Is that when he gave his official notice to resign when we started looking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with no point really, because I know that, my first full meeting on the board was in February and I got handed a pile of resumes. So I know the work had to have started before then, but whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We're mostly on the same history page,
Yeah.
and
So the firm that found Mr. Ferguson, we can't use them again. We have to put it out for bid or whatever the heck it is, right? We just can't go and.
We can send out letters of inquiry, we can RFP it, we can do it a lot of different ways.
I don't want to bring up all kinds of contingencies. And out of respect to Mr. Ferguson, I don't know what his plans are, but maybe he's moving to California. Maybe he's moving to Aruba. Where
that's
I'd like
why
to.
the solicitor appropriately told me to amend the motion so that it would be subject to Mr. Ferguson's acceptance.
The board will offer him, if he accepts it, that's up to him. So we're giving him first dibs as consultant so we can get the business of the township
No, I understand. It's just me coming from a private industry.
We understand, and as somebody who's been the owner of a business for 50 years and the CFO basically of a national nonprofit that's dealt with these matters for another 5, I totally understand what you're saying. But with municipal government, this board doesn't have the capability of doing what a township manager does.
I understand.
And the big things like forming a budget for 2023, entering into contracts, negotiating with unions. These are all things that need to be done by somebody with the real knowledge and qualifications. There is nobody more qualified than the man sitting over there with the township manager on the label. Nobody. So forgive us if we consider, for whatever reason, he decided to resign. But that being said, the members of this board want him to stay as best we can. So that's because there is nobody on this board that can do what he does. Nobody. None.
I understand that.
Okay?
All right, look.
And you know, I don't want to get anything further in detail because that would be basically something said in executive session. But for public consumption, I have, you know, and this is my opinion, and I've reserved until now my comments. There is nobody in this country that does what Mr. Ferguson does. Nobody who has taken a township on the brink of insolvency and turned it into the strong, vital township that we have today, where we have no problem in doing projects like crosswalks at Regency, hiring staff that can be more responsive to the people of this community, restoring Patterson Farm, lowering taxes, improving our bond rating. So forgive me, we're talking about a guy who has been a total gem to this community over the last 4 years. And for whatever, I'm on a roll here. I forgive me for being maybe a little above and beyond. But a man who has saved this township with his recommendations and his foresight. I've basically been quoted that in the Bucks County Herald. Thank you, Mr. English. We were very fortunate to have this guy. And if we can keep him for a few more months to settle things, I'm going to be grateful. But that's going to be up to him. We're just going to offer him the opportunity if he can do it.
And I hope you're going to make him an offer, an attractive offer to stay and help us.
You can be sure of that, sir. Thank you.
One thing, I've never heard you talk so loud. So
Well, sometimes I get a little passionate.
At least you're not sitting.
One of those few times. It's always good to see you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sure we'll have a chance to thank Mr. Ferguson.
We will. Is there any other public comment?
Thank you.
You're great.
Thank you, Lee.
Anything online? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's 4-1. Motion passes. Thank you.
Who is the one, Fred?
You, Dan.
I raised my hand for aye, by the way.
Oh,
It was
sorry.
5-0.
5-0.
Oh.
Excuse
I
me.
wanted to make sure. I didn't see anyone else.
Could be the delay in the film, you know,
Yeah.
the delay in the
Max
video.
Hedrick.
5-0. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 11.
Fred, can I ask you a quick question? It's almost a corollary to the last one. Do we have to, and this may be for our solicitor, in terms of engaging a search firm or starting the search process, do we have to put that as an agenda item for future
Yes.
discussion, or could we do it now?
Well, you know, I think technically you probably would have to do it at a future meeting, but if you want to, you could always, I think, start the process. I'm not sure who you, at least maybe you're not really spending money yet, but if you want to at least authorize.
I think last time we had to go through this process and Supervisor Lewis would be able to tell, maybe the chief.
So the chief was involved.
We did an RFP. I think we sent letters of inquiry out.
Yeah, I think you could just authorize him to send out letters to potential search firms.
We did
And
that
then,
last time.
because then I assume at some point after the process, you would have to vote on that anyway in terms of authorizing it. That's when
Right.
actually the real,
If we,
I think you could do that tonight. I was thinking about that as we were going through this process. So I
we
think it
have
makes sense.
consensus of the board to have the chief engage, send out letters of inquiry to various search firms, and then he can report to us and we can vote.
Yeah, yes, please.
Makes sense.
Sounds good?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Okay, item 10, solicitors report.
Yes, thank you. And as an aside, I've enjoyed working with Mr. Ferguson and I'll miss working with him. 6:30 tonight, an executive session started. All board members were present, either at the very beginning or shortly after that, along with myself, my partner Barbara Kirk, Chief Galuzzi, and Mr. Ferguson. The litigation items and informational items were discussed. The executive session was concluded, I think, around 7:25, just a few minutes before this meeting started. First thing under my report is not anything that's a vote necessarily, but was something that was discussed at the last meeting, and it certainly is something we were authorized to do, and at least tonight, I want to start an earnest discussion about a disposition of the sewer funds. Certainly tonight, based upon what we've done, I would not recommend any action be taken other than to pursue in more detail some of the different options that may be available. And I don't want to be too long, but it's important because, as everybody knows, on March 4th, the sewer system was sold. And then the net proceeds are in the area of around $21 million. So the question before this board and before the community is how best to protect and dispose of those funds or somehow maintain those funds for benefit of the residents now and in the future. The first question was asked of our firm, can a trust be created for purposes of maintaining the fund? And the answer is yes. And I won't go into all the detail, but I did provide the board and the township manager with a memo prepared by my colleagues that discussed some of the details of how that can be done. Trusts are permitted. The question is going to be, how protected can you make a trust? Municipal corporations are different from private individuals. There are various ways to do it. For example, Middletown Township used a resolution process and set up a trust with certain parameters. Some other places may include ordinances, which is at the next step in more restriction. And then one area or one possibility that's not necessarily recommended, but to be completely irrevocable, but may provide more bureaucracy and some other layers that may not be desired, would be a separate legal entity, such as an authority. So those are all certainly kind of 30,000-foot issues that have to be considered. Of course, also what has to be considered by the board is how much to set aside for this, whatever the mechanism is going to be, whether it's a trust or whether if it is a trust, then which method is going to be used. I think is it the desire to set aside all 21 million, to have 21 million set aside in different parcels, so to speak, within different trusts, within one trust with different parameters setting that information out, or whether a separate fund is set aside for purposes of being in the township budget, either in a capital or something else, and then having that amount set aside in a trust. So these are all conceptual issues, but ones that are certainly very important for the board to consider. So going through a lot of things very quickly, but I think from a conceptual perspective, the board and the township have a lot of important decisions to make. We want to provide that initial kind of overview, and then from there, you can direct us, or I think at some point you're going to want to have some type of financial analysis done. There are certain limitations on how funds can be invested in the second-class township code under section 3204 of the second-class township code. It kind of defines those different investment vehicles. Obviously, there are ones that are going to be more protected. They're not going to be risky investments because for many reasons, including the most important is fiduciary responsibility to the residents. There are limitations on the types of investment vehicles that can be used. But for example, Middletown, I'm not saying we should use their model, but there is a model there for them. They have a financial services committee that looks at things and has parameters in terms of how often they meet and what type of investments to monitor. There's also provision in Middletown, I don't have it with me right now, but I have looked at it, where they're allowed with certain steps to actually invade the principal if emergency is declared and a 6-month period of time ensues and a referendum is conducted. So it takes a lot under those circumstances for the principal to be invaded once you set that up. That's the model that they have. Kennett Township in Chester County has a policy that they've instituted, and also I think they have a separate board or committee that oversees that. So there are different ways to do this. The most important thing is if you set up a trust, the intent is normally for the principal to be protected and whatever net proceeds, whether it's interest, capital gains, however it's invested, to be utilized for other purposes that you may want to direct, whether you want to direct it for. Certain things are directed to be in the general fund. That's entirely up to the board. But I think these are all very important decisions given the amount of money that's in question. And also, I think the desire of many in the township to see that these be used for positive purposes going forward. So I don't know if I'll try to answer any of the questions you may have, but that's kind of like I said, the 30,000 foot view now, and then we can drill down from there.
Thank you, Dave. The most important thing that I think the board really wanted to grasp is the concept is a trust can be created. And that trust can be as restrictive or non-restrictive as the board may direct. And how we go from there will be determined by the will of, how we go ahead will be determined by the will of the board.
Right.
Okay. So I think now that we have all that information, we might need some time to figure this out. And then,
sure,
if it's okay with the board, we can hopefully have on the agenda the subsequent meeting, depending on what the chair decides, and then we can go into the details and getting into the meat and potatoes. So Supervisor McCartney, does that sound reasonable to you?
It does. Yeah, I think it gives everybody the opportunity to digest what Dave really has done from a 30,000 foot standpoint, and then maybe we can reconvene with some more specific ideas on how we want to move forward with a couple of these concepts.
Great. We'll take no action on A, and we'll go to item B.
B and C are related items. They're really identical in the sense that the motivation for each of these. People may recall that back, I can't remember the date, there are two separate resolutions, but there was an Economic Development Commission that was established. I think that one was the first one back in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. And it's my understanding in the last several years that there has been little, if any, regular activity by that commission. Not to say that the purpose is not important, but there may be other ways to meet the goals that were promoted by that commission at the time it was developed. So there was a request for this and for the Financial Advisory Board, which was created, I think, in 2013. Kind of both had performed some of the same tasks or overlapping tasks, but since then, neither one has met on a regular basis. So it's my understanding that the board would like to consider dissolving each of these, and a separate motion would be appropriate for each of them by resolution. But I guess with the caveat that there may be some consideration down the road, some kind of reformed committee, board, commission, or something like that that might perform some or all of the tasks that were performed by each of these. So if it's the board's pleasure, the first motion would be to consider resolution, and I think there's a number, but it's not in the agenda, to dissolve the Economic Development Commission per the resolution before you.
I make a motion to consider the resolution, which is, I believe, 22.8, to dissolve the Economic Development Commission.
Or a second?
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Lundy, seconded by Supervisor McCartney. Any comments or discussion from the board?
If I could, Mr. Chair,
First, I'd like to thank all prior members of the Economic Development Commission, but a special thank you to Tom Conoscenti, who no longer lives in Lower Makefield, actually lives in Houston now. And a couple of reasons for Tom deserving special thanks is that he helped spearhead an annual economic survey of Lower Makefield businesses to get a perspective on policy issues with respect to the township and business in the area. And it was very helpful for prior boards and current boards up until recently to get insight into that data as to what drove people to come to Lower Makefield. Also want to thank the other members of the board over the years for their help in helping fill Lower Makefield Corporate Center and helping get out the word in terms of economic development. So part of the reason that the Economic Development Commission was started was that we had some challenges post 2008, although I think it was started even, might have been before, with empty office space in the township. And the Economic Development Commission was helpful in encouraging folks. And now actually we've got pretty high occupancy there. And Lower Makefield has its hopefully the first of many Fortune 500 corporate headquarters with Crown Holdings. So there's a tremendous amount of great work that was done by the folks on that Economic Development Commission. And I think while at this time, because of lack of engagement and time and mission, it's best to sunset it and perhaps bring back those functions in a new commission. So I support the current dissolution, but I do want to thank all of those who've worked tirelessly to help improve the business climate within Lower Makefield. So I want to thank all of those people, Joan Kamens, David Schmid, David Wilner, a whole host of folks that have been on there over the years. So thank you.
Any other comments or discussion?
Supervisor Weiss?
Brenner?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, just want to echo what Supervisor Lewis said. I won't repeat it other than just say thank you to everyone that's been involved. Lately there hasn't been as much action in this particular committee, but I want them to realize that they did provide value add to the township for quite some time, and it doesn't go unnoticed. The only other thing I would add, it's kind of related to what we just talked about a little bit, and it's kind of related so items A, B, and C are somewhat related, even if they're not meant to be, I think. And when we look at in the solicitor's memo to us about the sewer sale, one of the models that's interesting to me is Middletown, in that they have a committee that sort of teams with a finance director to look at financial issues, probably economic development issues, and also more than likely the large fund that they created that we're also considering. So I'm in favor of dissolution, but what I'm hopeful for is that we can move fairly quickly to be thoughtful about a new charter for some new committee. And at the same time, as we think about some new committee, when we look at the large financial issues that we are addressing and considering over the next however many months, and as we move forward, I would also like to see us consider hiring a finance director in addition to a new township manager, so that we can take the burden of all of those. Kurt, I think we spoke, in your first 6 months versus a year, the many hundreds of hours that a township manager, the way we're set up now, has to put towards the budget. I would love to have a finance director to take some of that burden off of a township manager, so that they can focus on, for lack of a better description, managing everything, and then overseeing a finance director separately, so that they can, I think budgets are huge burdens, as we all know, on township managers when they don't have that help next to them. So I would like us, one, I'm okay with a dissolution, but two, would love to reconstitute a new committee, maybe a hybrid of these two, coupled with whatever we end up doing with this trust, or however we end up forming it with the sewer sale proceeds, but also involving a new finance director at some point. So so I'm in favor of the motion, but I see A, B, and C being intertwined at some point in the future, just based on what we're starting to hear and Dave's analysis and other things.
By the way, I want to give credit to my colleagues at my firm. 90% of what was in that memo was done by other people.
All good.
I won't give you a sarcastic response, Dave, but thank you for. I'm sure they did a great job.
I know delegating is one of the jobs we have to do, and especially when you have talent, it's good to delegate to. I think that's true for a lot of places.
Exactly.
Any other comment, discussion? Any public comment? Any online comment? There being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? No? 5-0. Good.
The next motion would be really identical in terms of the rationale for dissolving the Financial Advisory Board, and I think the comments probably would apply equally to that as they did for the prior motion, so I won't belabor the issue anymore. That just ask for considering passing the resolution, I guess, 22-29 to dissolve the Financial Advisory Board.
22-9. So moved.
Second.
Second. Motion made by Supervisor Blondie, seconded by Supervisor Grenier. Any discussion on this motion?
Very quickly, again, just they're different committees, so you just want to say a big thank you to everyone that's ever been involved with the Financial Advisory Committee. I was liaison twice, I think. Great group of people, and just wanted to make sure they also get a shout out and a thank you. Otherwise, same comments as I just made and everything else.
You can just say Fred Childs. No, I mean, there's a lot of people who have been involved, but certainly Fred's been on that particular board since I've been a supervisor. So thanks to him and thanks to everybody who helps to volunteer on our committees.
There's no other board comment. Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next thing under here is that Mr. Ferguson has given a very good background on the rationale for having to advertise the ordinance here. We actually have done this slightly different from the first one because we can actually speed up the process a little bit more, especially after consulting with our outside advisory council. We've had this ordinance so certain areas are blank because we're just advertising it now to be eligible for enactment at the next meeting, assuming, and I think it's a good assumption, that we will receive competitive proposals and that one will be the most competitive and that can be plugged into that ordinance at the next meeting for enactment. So we would just ask this ordinance be approved for advertisement.
I'd like to make a motion to consider advertisement of ordinance number 429. Authorizing the road repair program loan financing.
We've got a motion made by Supervisor Blondie, seconded by Supervisor Grenier to advertise the ordinance authorizing road repair program loan financing. Any comments, discussion from the board? Hearing none. Any public comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand. Aye.
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 5-0. Thank you.
Is James still on?
Oh, James, are you there?
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yes, I said aye.
We just want to make sure the minutes reflect who was present for these votes.
Yeah,
So,
sorry
yeah.
about that.
Right.
5-0. Thank you. Okay. Good. Item 11, zoning hearing board.
Yes, next, we have 4 items. I'll try to go through these comprehensively quickly. So you want to get to one, it may be difficult. The first one, Appeal 22-1955, Eric and Kimberly Chernikovich. Appeal for the property located at 1505 Fox Hollow Drive, tax parcel 20-024-091. They request a variance from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-23 capital B to increase the impervious surface from the existing 21.7 to 24.5%. 21% is the allowable amount in order to install an in-ground concrete pool with concrete decking. As in the past, we've seen this frequently. We would recommend deferral unless there's some other sentiment. This is not in a flood zone or floodplain. Hearing no contrary or a different approach. We move on to the next one, Appeal 22-1956, Universal Building and Construction. Appeal for the property located at 1273 Lindenhurst Road, tax parcel 20-003-020. The applicant intends to subdivide the property into 3 lots, construct single-family dwellings on the 2 new lots, and request variances from the Township Zoning Ordinance 200-16 in order to permit a maximum density of 1.63 dwelling units per acre, where 1.07 is permitted under the ordinance, and also from section 200-61.C to permit the measurement of building setbacks from the lot lines where the ordinance would require setbacks to be measured from the limits of resource protected lands. Based on some of the different issues here, we would recommend participation, but again, it's up to the board. If the board wishes to participate and authorize our office to attend, we would need a vote to direct us to do that.
Make a motion to participate.
Do I hear a second?
Second, yeah, I think so. Yeah, second.
I hear a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah,
Any public?
Fred, very quickly, the variance related to setbacks from lot lines versus resource protected lands. I'm just looking at the Bucks County parcel and floodplain viewer, and I'm trying to see what are the resource protected lands at the site. From the aerial. It doesn't look. And right on cue. Thank you, Mr. Majewski. The aerial doesn't jump out at me as to what the resource protected areas might be.
Mr. Majewski, do you have a comment on that one?
The lot does have a few steep slope areas on there, and there also are a little area that would be classified as woodlands. However, I think the applicant maybe overstated the amount of woodlands that they have on there, and that's one of the reasons why the density, I think, will go down. It will be above the amount allowable by the ordinance, but I believe it'll be much closer to being in compliance than what they have in their application.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to see what would qualify as woodlands just based on what the area looks like. It doesn't, not much, unless they have 10 really big trees.
They do in one area.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other board discussion or comments? Any public comment? Any online comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0.
Next, bear with me on this one. I don't know if I have to. I'm not going to. Appeal 22-1957, Cellco Partnership doing business as Verizon Wireless. Appeals for the property located at 499 Stony Hill Road, tax parcel 20-034-001. For everybody's benefit, this is the Brookside swimming pool location, or swimming club location, excuse me. The applicant requests a variance from Township Ordinance 200-28 to allow for proposed telecommunications facility within the R-3M zoning district, which would be a 120-foot height monopole, 12-panel antennas, and some other apparatuses. And the appeal is from challenging the validity of the ordinance, for one thing, under 2 different versions of the Telecommunications Act, the Federal Act, one of 1934, the other of 1996. And there's also a use variance request as part of this as well. While we have a little bit of background, there was a previous variance requested back in 2009. After extensive hearings, the zoning hearing board at that time denied it, basically for the reasons that there was not proof by the applicant at that time that the requested apparatus was needed for adequate coverage. That is still, in our assessment, an issue that would be before the zoning hearing board. There was also a companion federal court appeal to the validity of the ordinance itself and how it was worded. And at that time, the federal court found in favor of the township in terms of the validity of the ordinance. We have not determined yet whether that federal court decision would be what's called the res judicata or issue preclusion. I know Supervisor Lundy knows what that means. But we would like to at least have the opportunity to look at that some more. There is no prohibition against another variance request, even though a prior one was denied. But we would again feel that there's probably adequate reason, at least either to participate or in this case, perhaps to oppose until we hear more information that would justify the variances as requested in this circumstance. And just for everybody's benefit, this is in a residential area, and not that that is, precluded it necessarily, but we do have in the township an overlay district in the periphery of the township where, with a conditional use application before this board, cell towers are permitted if the sort of standards are met. So it's not as if there's not an opportunity for cell towers to be located in the township in certain areas. So that's a long-winded way of saying that we would recommend opposition if the board would so agree with this, and then they would have to vote to authorize us to oppose.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board authorize the solicitor to participate and oppose appeal number 22-1957, Cellco Partnership.
Second.
No.
We got a motion from Supervisor Lewis, second by Supervisor Grenier. Any discussion from the board?
I'll just, sure. I'll just, in addition to everything that our solicitor mentioned about, there is what I'll call a cell phone overlay district, cell phone tower overlay district. Again, looking at the online information for the site, it has a surprisingly large area of map floodways and floodplains off the back, and some very large areas that I'm going to guess are considered to be woodlands per ordinances. So that I don't know where they would attempt to place this thing or site this thing, but when you add in all those other features, it's more than just a cell tower going in a residential area. There's a lot of other zoning features and regulated features that may come into play here. It's concerning.
Any other comments or discussion from the board? Any public comment? Online comment? No further comment. We'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, and the last one under this agenda item, Appeal 22-1958, Andrew Scher, appeals for the property located at 1525 Derbyshire Road, tax parcel 20-055-025, requesting a variance from Township Zoning Ordinance 200-23 capital B in order to permit a 420 square foot addition, which would increase the impervious surface from 30.3% to 33.1%, where 30% is the allowable amount. It has not been reported that this is in a flood area or flood zone. We would recommend deferral unless there's a separate, different dissemination by the board. Hearing none, then that will be deferred. You want me to move on to item 12? This is much shorter. There is an extension request for 1566 LLC subdivision plan number 685. The motion will be to accept the extension, grant of extension to July 31st, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Motion made by Supervisor Grenier, seconded by Supervisor Blundy. Any comments or discussion from the board? Any public comment?
It's at Lindenhurst and Mirror Lake Road. I don't know all the details. I know Jim is on. He could tell us about it, but there are some residential structures on that property. There's a proposal to subdivide it and to add some other residences, certainly within other.
Mr. Kotzoff property?
What's that?
Kotzoff property?
I believe it is. It's at that's the right location, right, Jim?
It's actually Newtown Yardley Road and Creamery Road, and the access to the 4 new lots would be from an extension of Buck Creek Drive. So
actually, I was thinking that location had the streets wrong, but that's exactly where I was thinking. So
I think there's.
I knew where you knew where it was.
Yeah.
There's a sign up.
Right.
Any public comment? Online comment? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that's all I have.
Go to item 13, general public comment. Come on up.
Pedowitz, 247 Truman Way, Yardley. Just quick, regarding the paving program, I know it was established in the budget, what roads are going to be repaved, but what about the walkways, especially along Oxford Valley Road? I know they're privately owned, but they're in hazardous conditions. So I don't know. I mentioned it to Kurt and
Code enforcement.
No. Part of the issue with those, I know we've talked about this, is those were trails that were put in as part of a project on a PennDOT road where PennDOT does not accept trails within their right of way. Through the solicitor's office and Barbara Kirk, we've been having discussions with the developer or with the property owner about alternatives for how that can be maintained in the future, since PennDOT will not accept it. But it was put in a number of years ago where it was put in with that sort of glitch that I just mentioned. So I would expect and hope that maybe we can come up with something for the board as possibility for how we can have that maintained. When there was snow and stuff on it this year, we went out and did our portion right up to where we ended. And the property owner was kind enough, even though they're technically not responsible for it, for clearing off the difference. But we'll have to come up with some possibility for the board to see that that's done. But that's the entirety of the problem. It is a trail that was put on as part of a project on a PennDOT road when PennDOT will not accept maintenance for trails on state roads. So that's the answer to that still will be to come.
Okay, because I know a couple of years ago, I mentioned it to Jim and he contacted the owner and they actually did some, for lack of a better words, half-assed job at correcting some root protrusions through the walkways, but they're hazardous. And I even reported to the police once. I saw somebody trip and the police came out and they actually coned the thing off. So, and now with this, the weather getting nice, it'd be nice if they could do something about it. Well, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again. Donna Doan, 2814 Langhorne Yardley Road, Langhorne. Just wanted to bring a couple points, sow some ideas for the board tonight. I'm not looking for any discussion because the hour is so late, but I just wanted to make some suggestions regarding obviously Patterson Farm. But the foremost issue really for the preservation is to protect the farm from encroachment. So I wanted to address that tonight. Encroachment of non-agricultural uses on the farm. We've seen over the past few years, it's always just a few acres here, there, and everywhere that whittles our farms away. So we've changed from a township where we were almost 100% agricultural. In my lifetime, I've seen almost completely all of the farms go. So we're down to the last handful. Additional non-agricultural uses increase the likelihood of conflict, noise, dust, moving machinery around. These are the kinds of things that people complain about. So if you can keep a safe space for agriculture, that's the desired outcome here. And I ask that the township support and protect the farmer by placing the Patterson Farm lease in the hands of the Township Farmland Preservation Corporation. That's what they were formed for. And to my knowledge, Patterson Farm itself is the only piece of farmland that's not overseen by that Farmland Preservation Corporation with regard to the leasing. So doing so would reduce the risk that future boards of supervisors will be pressured to remove the land from the lease, as we saw with the hydroponic greenhouse. At the time, it was leased to our local farmers, and still a piece of that acreage was carved out, even though the farmer was leaseholder. So if that could be avoided in the future, that would be appreciated as well. Please remove the clause that allows the board to adjust the acreage. It's sort of unsavory, I have to say. We were shocked to find that there was a clause in there that this former township solicitor said, well, we're allowed to adjust the acreage. We hope that doesn't happen in the future. The farmer is put into a sort of uncomfortable position of not being able to maybe speak as freely as they would like, having the board hold the lease and negotiate the lease and so on. It makes the situation a little bit uncomfortable. So if we get, again, have it under the Farmland Preservation Corporation, that would foster an enhanced relationship with the farmers, and it would be so appreciated. Another thing to consider is the repayment of funds that were harvested from the Patterson farm years ago and set those funds aside for maintenance. We fully recognize that it was not a very good situation, just to put it mildly, with the township's finances. And so it is true that a lot of funds were taken from the farm and used elsewhere to patch the holes. So if we could bring some of those funds back, that would be very appreciated. I know there was $483,581.09 that were received for the I-95 exit loop. And it would be nice to know where those funds went, because we don't see evidence of them being spent on the farm. Again, these are past situations that we would love to see the board correct. And the most cost-effective way to manage Patterson Farm is not to convert it to other uses, but to let it fulfill its original purpose for agriculture. Let me cite one example. A while ago, when the township owned the Elm Lounge property, it was considered to make the barn into an entertainment venue. The township spent tens of thousands of dollars on researching whether that was a viable option or not. I think they spent almost $40,000, if memory serves, just for the studies. And it resulted in the conclusion that it was actually cheaper to go build a new entertainment center elsewhere rather than try and convert the barn. The township recently built the community center that's available for use. The new Wegmans development, I understand, will also contain an entertainment venue. So I'm asking the board, please don't waste time and money and go down the same road again, entertaining the idea of a possible barn conversion on Patterson Farm for an entertainment venue. Let it please remain a farm. It's not that the farm doesn't work, it's that in the past, prior management was so deeply in debt that they really didn't have the best interest of the farm at heart. And maybe they felt like farm wasn't important, but certainly is important today. So I may have gotten the feeling from the board that maybe a farm is not enough. It's not enough of a public draw. So let me just toss out this idea to you. Preserve Patterson Farm as the Patterson Agricultural and Heritage Center. Keep the main focus in agriculture. Allow for the teaching of future farmers. We have an FFA group in the local area. It used to be Future Farmers of America. Now they call it Future for Agriculture. We have Del Val College that we could work in partnership with. It would allow children to see food growing. It would a heritage center would allow for the honoring of our Quaker ancestors. It's a place that we could foster the appreciation of the natural benefits of Patterson Farm without overrunning those natural benefits. As far as the Quaker ancestors go, we could interpret the history of the property and as it relates to Pensbury Manor, Bolton Mansion, Three Arches, Historic Fallsington, and the Edgewood Village. The restoration of Satterthwaite House with Patterson Farm Preservation and Residents. We will work with local organizations, put on programs, work with the Bucks County Technical High School. They have a horticulture program. They're interested to come and join us and partner with us. Work with students, work with scouts, promote local food security, and with the emphasis on low impact gatherings, offering a variety of programs, not events that draw 500 cars to the farm when the farmers are trying to do their work. And most importantly, the Patterson Agriculture and Heritage Center would honor the contributions of Tom and Alice Patterson to this community, their community, our community. The way they live, their healthy lifestyle is certainly something we need to look up to and embrace and teach to the next generations. The Pattersons had a great work ethic. Their love for the land was evident, their stewardship, so that they preserved it so that future generations can enjoy it. We should enhance and continue that. So steps going forward, I'd like to suggest that the board get in contact with John Ives at the Bucks County Ag Land Preservation board. He's the administrator. The land is valued high right now. There's about $456,000 on the table if you would entertain this idea. We have mostly new supervisors. We have all new commissioners, and John Ives is the new farmland preservation administrator. So now it's a great opportunity to get involved with that program. Expand the conservation easement, reap the financial reward the taxpayers pay into, and set those funds aside to save the farm, bring it back from the demolition by neglect of past boards, and allow Patterson Farm Preservation to have a presence on the farm, to attract sponsors, do fundraising, promote CSA, and so on. So in closing, I understand the board inherited a very difficult situation. I recognize that. Thankfully, now the township has reduced its debt burden and can focus on issues that have gone unaddressed for quite some time. I hope you'll consider expanding the conservation easement and moving forward with fiscal responsibility and the need for food security, healthy environment and lifestyle, and preservation of our important heritage in mind. Let agriculture remain Patterson Farm's highest and best use. And as a PS, for anyone who's interested, on the pattersonfarmpreservation.org website, we still have Satterthwaite House Cat's Meow collectibles, and we also have Satterthwaite House watercolor paintings, prints for framing, and Satterthwaite note cards. Thanks very much and good night.
Good night.
Great.
Any other public comment?
I'm sorry.
Any online comment? Hearing none, we'll go to item 14, discussion items. Any discussion items? I don't think there are. Item 15, supervisor reports. Supervisor McCartney?
Nothing to report at this time.
I have nothing to report. Supervisor Grenier? Supervisor Grenier, do you have anything to report?
I'll hit the button, sorry. Planning Commission meets on Monday, the 11th, HARB meets on Tuesday, the 12th, and Historic Commission meets on Wednesday, the 13th. The Electric Reliability Committee postponed their meeting until July. That's all.
Supervisor Blundy?
First of all, we did call out Fred earlier, and I feel remiss because there are so many other people that I've gotten to work with on the board, and specifically someone named Cynthia Weiss. So thank you to her for her leadership as the chair of the committee for the years that I first joined the board. And then my friend Mr. Jonah is here. The EAC has sent to the board a very thoughtful proposal on the concept of, I'll just say, charging, considering adopting some type of ordinance or resolution where we would charge a fee every time someone had to have a disposable bag to take their goods from a business within Lower Makefield Township. So that could be a grocery store, that could be a shopping store, that could be a restaurant. Jonah has worked very hard on it, sadly for us, but to the benefits of our neighbors up north. Jonah will be leaving the township at the middle of the summer, and he's just hoping to get some discussion, if not tonight, then in the future, on the appetite for the board to consider such an idea.
Thank you. Supervisor Lewis?
One quick comment. The Trenton Mercer Review Board will be meeting tomorrow right here in this room at 7:30 p.m. And the discussion will be reviewing the FAA's finding of no significant impacts and record of decision for the environmental assessment associated with the Trenton Mercer development of the new passenger facility. So it's something that the review board will be reviewing tomorrow in this room at 7:30. Thank you.
There's no appointments to boards and commissions. Is there any other business before the board? No other business. As in tradition of Supervisor McCartney, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Here a second, all those.
Feel better, James.
Say good night.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night. Thank you.
Good night.
Take care, everybody.